Hey, this is Cedric Youngelman, your host of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Today's epic rip with Professor David B. Collum, where we discuss his 2023 year in review, or as he likes to call it, his annual effort to get fired, is brought to you by River. River is the Bitcoin exchange of choice for the long-term investor. I have been using River for over 3 years because they are a Bitcoin-only company that has earned my trust through their proof of work. Securely buy Bitcoin at the tightest spreads in the industry. Have peace of mind thanks to their 100% full reserve cold storage custody, and enjoy zero fees on recurring orders. River built and owns their own infrastructure. Your Bitcoin is your Bitcoin to withdraw at any time. If you need help getting started or have questions, River has US-based phone support for all clients. Use my referral link in the show notes to get started and earn up to $100 in Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin deserves the best protection. With Thea, you're in charge. No more fears of losing your keys or falling prey to hackers. Their self-custody, multi-sig vault empowers you to be the ultimate guardian of your Bitcoin. Share the power of secure Bitcoin with your loved ones like I have. Thea is my favorite multi-sig solution because Thea enables shared custody, making it a family-friendly choice for safeguarding your digital legacy. And for those unexpected moments, Thea's got your back. Their multi-device vaults with both assisted and sovereign recovery options mean your Bitcoin is safe, always accessible and ready for the future. Thea is more than an app. It's your partner in the Bitcoin journey with 24/7 support from a team that cares. Download Thea now using the link in the show notes and get your first 6 months free and experience the new standard in Bitcoin multi-sig security. At the Bitcoin Advisor, I am here to help you get your Bitcoin off your exchange, simplify the process, address your Bitcoin challenges, and ensure you feel confident every step of the way. I can help you set up your multi-sig and secure your Bitcoin for decades to come while ensuring you can sleep at night with the right estate planning and asset protection strategies to make sure your Bitcoin is safe for you and your family. If you or someone you know needs help buying Bitcoin and creating a multi-sig vault, I'm here to help. Head over to thebitcoinadvisor.com/Cedric, TheBitcoinadvisor.com/CEDRIC now, and put some time on my calendar. The link to set up time to chat with me can also be found in the show notes. I'm more than happy to chat, explain what we do, and how we can help you secure your Bitcoin for generations. Alpa Energy Bars, a new kind of energy bar. Live life untamed. Question everything. Alpa bars are made with high-quality Colorado grass-fed beef, American-sourced fruits and nuts, and nutrient-rich beef tallow, so they make for a great pick-me-up. When I need a meal replacement, snack, or just some much-needed fuel for the burn, and I don't want toxic fiat sludge, I reach for an Alpa Premium Meat Bar. If you don't believe everything you're told, if you break the rules, strive for freedom, reach for your peak, and don't follow the mainstream, then you're one of us. On the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, we question everything, including what real health is. The Chad of energy bars, challenging the norm and supporting freedom. Go to eatalpa.com, EATAUPA.com, and use the code MATRIX for a discount. Link can also be found in the show notes. Y'all getting cold out there yet? Come take a break in the best vacation spot for Bitcoiners this February 3rd. It's going to be an unforgettable weekend in Tampa, Florida. Get ready for an unforgettable evening as we usher in a new era of prosperity at the Sound Money Soiree. We're thrilled to announce this exclusive event, marking the official grand opening of the Bitcoin Bay Foundation and the grand unveiling of Tampa as the next Bitcoin city in the United States. Join us for an extraordinary night of networking, entertainment, and giving back, all in the Bitcoin Bay style. This soiree promises to be a one-of-a-kind experience, connecting the Bitcoin community with Tampa Bay's most influential business leaders. The Sound Money Soiree event features a dynamic poker table, an electrifying DJ, an enticing silent auction, and a delectable all-you-can-eat and drink culinary experience that embodies the essence of Tampa Bay's finest cuisine. The link can be found in the show notes to get 15% off your tickets when you use the code MATRIX. bitcoinbay.live/sound-money-soiree, SOIREE. And now, Let's enter the Bitcoin matrix with David B. Collum.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Dave Collum's Year in Review is the most anticipated content of the year. It's finally here, fully referenced and completely irreverent. And it goes down some dark rabbit holes. David B. Collum, welcome back to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you, my friend?
It's always an honor to be back. I'm great. I'm doing fine. The rabbit holes are driving me nuts, but besides that.
Yeah, I'm sure. How's the wife?
She's been better. She, for those who don't know, family, probably some sort of record anywhere. About 15 years ago, she broke her neck. A year ago, December 5th, she broke it again. Year ago, December 8th, she broke it a third time. Different break. Fell 3 days after breaking it the second time. So it's healed, sort of. No loss of function, but she hurts like a son of a bitch. Get out of here, Charlie. It hurts so much in the stability question. We're leaning towards getting it fused, but it's hard to find a doctor who wants to fuse it because they don't know how much it hurts and they don't really know her history, which is profound. And so they just think it's like a standard broken neck. It's like, no, it's not a standard broken neck. Fuck, this dog is going to drive me crazy. No, Charlie, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, so besides that, I had a bladder stone out this year. That was fun. 1.5-inch bladder stone. And that was more tedious and painful than I was told it would be. And so I felt inspired to write about the faltering healthcare system this year.
Yeah, it's brutal. And it's really interesting hearing you talk about the faulting or the failing healthcare system, considering your, position at Cornell. And, you would think it almost be on a different level. I'm almost relieved that you're dealing with what we have and that there's not a different system out there, maybe, but it's brutal.
Well, I think ours is as good as it gets. I mean, I think Cornell's Aetna plan is as good as it gets, but I'm just trying to run into stuff that just didn't used to occur. I think some of it is, as the digital world encroaches on the healthcare system, you find yourself not getting healthcare.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay out of the healthcare system.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's like $5,000 to get a Tylenol and show up to the emergency room. Last year, your year in review was All Roads Lead to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading this year's year in review, and I couldn't help to think that all roads lead to the border. The border here with Mexico. Right. It almost seems like either every issue comes back to the border, whether it's directly or indirectly, just in terms of philosophy or ethics or morals or just how people are kind of seeing the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see down at the border? Is this a serious issue? Is this a bigger issue than before?
Well, I think it ramped up profoundly with Biden. So it is definitely more serious than it was 3 years ago. People say the wall would do any good. I don't buy it. It might not stop the flow, but it certainly would constrict it, just like corrosion in a pipe constricts flow, right? Anything you do to restrict flow is going to restrict flow. We're a nation of immigrants. Yeah, I've heard that. When we were in the 19th century, we were expanding westward. We needed a lot of bodies. They didn't have to be the brightest bulbs. They didn't have to be skilled. We needed basically bodies to move westward and do manual labor and stuff like that. And then in the tech world, we certainly brought in tons of immigrants who knew how to program and stuff like that. But these immigrants don't appear to serve any specific purpose. I also find that the explanation for why the borders have been thrown wide open I don't buy the models. I don't buy the explanations. You can't have wide open borders and a welfare state. The two don't work. So if you're gonna throw the borders wide open, then you got to say, but you're on your own. And we're not doing either, right? We're throwing them wide open, and it's costing us a fortune. So there's something going on. It's more complicated than I think a lot of people think. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's to get voters. I think that's absurd. It could be to drive down the price of labor. I'm a sort of Goldwater conservative Reagan Republican who's now concluding that corporate America is pretty slimy at this point, and lacks morality, which is probably not corporate America as much as just changes in the way people view the world, probably generational change. So yeah, the borders, it also could be something much bigger, like, I keep coming back to the fact that there's so many things that seem to not make any sense whatsoever. And the reason must be, therefore, that my world model's wrong, right? If it doesn't make sense, then you're working with the wrong model. When you're working on a complex problem, if you got it right, the puzzle pieces start going together. It's like playing solitaire. And all of a sudden the cards start going up and you go, I'm going to make it. Or it's like a jigsaw puzzle and you go, okay, I'm almost there. It's working. And the pieces going very quickly. When the pieces are refusing to fit together, it means you've done something wrong. There's something wrong with your model. So the overview that explains it, it's stark, is that someone is attempting to destroy us. I've come to that conclusion. Someone's attempting to destroy us. And is it for money? Is it for power? Is it just normal humans being humans? I don't know. But there's too many decisions being made in which the people making them seem to have no fundamental sense of who we are, right? The foundational principles of the United States, we all, up until recently, in my opinion, we all kind of agreed what we stood for. We might disagree how to get there and what we should do for the down and out, things like that. But now it just seems like there's people who don't hold any of those principles dear. So that's what I see.
I mean, do we know who's coming over the border and from where?
I think we do, actually. Kennedy went down there and spent a couple days, and he said that his estimate was 2% were Spanish speakers. 2%. Now, maybe is it the wrong crossing, right? But you've seen a lot of Asians, a lot of North Africans, which is code for who the hell knows what these guys are. The numbers coming across are so gargantuan. We saw it. This is a replay. It happened in Europe. So a few years ago, I wrote about it. And they're flooding into Europe, into Sweden, and they're giving them teddy bears and shit. And I'm going, why are they doing this? Because the Europeans do know that there's a clash of cultures here, right? You don't have to think that one culture is bad and the other culture is good to recognize that there are cultures that don't fit together well. Their moral values are different. Their belief systems are so different. You say, look, just kind of stay away from each other, right? It doesn't make sense to mix oil and vinegar. It's not gonna mix. And yet the leaders of the European countries were silent, with the exception of the one I know of is Viktor Orban of Hungary. He said, screw that, we're not taking him. And he got guff. He got a lot of guff.
Right. It also seems that this process is somewhat coordinated.
Yes.
I mean, some of it's overtly coordinated, whether it's governors playing, let's call it politics, and moving people around, and maybe other organizations moving people around. And yet it's not, maybe polished on the receiving side. I mean, it doesn't seem like the sanctuary cities know actually how to handle the problem, maybe. And do you think that this is going to cause some sort of breakdown in the city, society, America? I mean, or is this something we could paper over? Or are they trying to build our army up? Maybe they want to You said maybe it's not for votes. Maybe it's maybe military men aged men are coming over and they could fight for citizenship.
These guys, depending on where they're coming from, you would not want to hand them a gun. Right? I don't think you want to be. I mean, one thing the military does is get you to truly believe in your cause, so that when you got to save your comrades, you actually risk your life to do it. Right? These are not going to become Navy SEALs. They're not going to become Marines. They're not going to. What are they going to become? So the idea of building a military off of these guys, they're not going to fight for a cause that we care about. Why would they? Would you? I mean, if you went to Afghanistan or something, would you fight for the Afghans? No. So that seems like a silly argument to me. Not that it wasn't smart to bring it forward, because that is one of the arguments. The voter thing makes no sense, even though there are cities trying to put through legislation to let them vote, which is just insane to me. But so I look at whoever's doing that, and they're part of the problem. They shouldn't be able to vote.
Do you think any external entities are taking advantage of the border being open?
Sure.
I mean, even in small numbers?
I think they're in big numbers. Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole thing is orchestrated. These people are coming over, a lot of them are coming over the border looking pretty pristine, like they just got dropped off somewhere. And when a bunch come over the border and they're all wearing the same T-shirt thanking Joe Biden, there's something really screwy. And so I don't know what it is. It just feels all wrong to me. Everything feels wrong to me. I mean, you name a narrative, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It just absolutely everything feels wrong. It just Wall Street feels wrong, and geopolitics feels wrong. The elections feel wrong. And then the question is why? And if I were a globalist, let's say there are globalists. I hate to point at Klaus Schwab, because I think he's just a clown frontman. It's just stupid to think Klaus Schwab is of any importance in this story. But if you're a globalist, the first question is why? And it could just be power. You know, I just finished Michael Malice's book on Stalin. A normal mind can't comprehend why a twisted mind does what it does. So when you read about Stalin, we all know 40 million died. What we don't know is how they died. Well, Malice does a great job of showing that. And it's just the most twisted implosion of a society you could ever imagine. It's a great book. So why would Stalin kill 40 million people, including elite doctors and elite engineers and his generals? And just why would he do it? Why would Mao kill 40 million, right? These are unimaginable decisions being made. But if you were a globalist and you wanted the power of being a globalist, and some guy like Yuval Harari, right? Guys spouting off about how, we're transhumanism. I go, someone put a cork in that bastard's face. Right? I don't want to hear any more of that crap. It's either stupid or sick or twisted or evil. I don't know what it is, but it's not normal. I read both his books. Remember how much Sapiens got raved about? Sapiens was a bestseller. It was crap, in my opinion. I'll tell you why it was crap. I love anthropology. I love that sort of stuff. I got to the end. I couldn't remember what he said. It wasn't sticky. A good book is sticky. I can remember it. And then I read Homo Deus. Same thing, same problem. And so Harari's out there just spewing shit. And when he spews it, and he gets no pushback, someone should say, hey, Yuval, you're a sick fuck. Why are you saying that shit? And no one is. Well,
he gets
people
praised.
Like you, he gets praised, right? And so there's something going on there. So if you wanted to conquer, if you were a globalist, the question I would ask rhetorically, what's your enemy? And the enemy is nationalism, right? The enemy are people who believe that we need borders. And, I don't believe that there's something sacred about borders, but, as humans evolved, they went from small tribes that had very little structure, maybe one guy in charge, to villages that started to pick up structure, to towns and city states, and then sovereign states. And these are all natural progressions as the population, as the group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But I don't think we've hit the global stage. I want nothing to do. I don't want guys in Brussels telling me what to do. For that matter, I don't want guys in goddamn California telling me what to do. So, so if you want to be a globalist, then you got to bring down nationalism. And who are the two biggest nationalists in the world? Well, Trump and Putin. Those guys are nationalists. Those are the two big gargantuan nationalists. There are other nationalists, but they can be dealt with when needed. Trump is in the way. Putin is in the way. Who are we going at now? Trump and Putin. So I think if I had to destroy the United States, or at least bring it down to some sort of stump, I'd destroy the concept of borders.
So what do you think of nationalism? Would you want your children or grandchildren to fight to defend maybe against some of these enemies who might be taking advantage of this situation? Do you believe in nationalism? It seems like maybe globalism is not the natural evolution, but the path that we're on in terms of societies getting bigger and people wanting more centralized control, maybe being the elites or the globalists, but it seems like they're pushing us in that direction. It seems like we're and we have a lot of things that would facilitate that. The internet will help us maybe get to one language or one money, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So there will be more opportunities for global interconnectedness, and there might even be some benefits from that.
Well, we had that. We had that in 1913, right?
Right.
That didn't stop 1914 from arriving.
Right.
I think a lot of people might endorse a bunch of bad ideas, one of which is globalism, one of which is, I think we should go the other way. I think we should go back to states' rights. So I'm a pro-choice guy, but I sort of supported the Supreme Court decision because when I wrote about it, I tried to write my way to an understanding. So I wrote about it and dug into a lot of the background cases and stuff that maybe led up to it. And what I realized is I don't see why the citizens of Mississippi should have to share the same value set as the citizens of California. And I get the women's rights. I support the women's right. But I also think maybe the abortion as a stopgap measure had been taken too far. There were activists saying, post-birth abortions. I call that genocide, right? So if you, as a pro-choice guy, if you said, look, I'm going to draw a bright line in the sand, you have to choose one of the two. Either you support choice all the way up to birth or no abortion. I support no abortion. If they force me to make that choice, I will become an anti-abortionist. Don't make me make that choice. We had a kind of an uneasy truce where the people who opposed it morally and the people who supported it as a freedom were kind of on the same page. What I think I could see, and again, as a pro-choice guy, I don't think I'm biased here, is I think the activist left was pushing the abortion issue for some reason that I don't understand. They had abortion and they started pushing the date back further and further, and there were cases where they were literally passing laws in states saying you could have sort of a post-birth abortion. I think it might have been why the Supreme Court took on the case. And so you can blame the activists, who reminds me a little when Kevorkian was trying to support, end of life assistance. I knew a lot of doctors who said, he's not doing us any good. We had this under control. We would say to the family, we could make them more comfortable, blah, blah, blah. This had been dealt with in their opinion. Now he was thrown out center stage, and all of a sudden now they can't do anything. They were handcuffed because it was too visible. Whereas it used to be this quiet wink, wink, nod, nod between the family and the doctors. So the activists, I think, might have pushed it to the brink. And then I would argue the pro-choice crowd lost that fight. I think by pushing pro-choice, pro-life to the states, I think the pro-choice crowd That was a big battle. They lost because there was no such ban anywhere before. So now those bans are appearing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think abortion is one of those third rail issues,
Very much so.
and I think that it gets debated in a lot of terms that have nothing even to do with maybe what some of the people are arguing about, or it gets, it could be about states' rights, it could be about pro-life, it could be about, but I do think in terms of maybe where you're getting at with the left, that there's sort of a march towards death, or, sort of a march towards just, limiting birth rates in the Western world.
Well, but there are demographers like Zihan who think that we're heading for a catastrophic demise in birth rates. And so then the
But
question
it seems
is,
like by design is what I'm getting at.
right.
Like
So
Malthusian
that's Club of Rome crap. That's
right.
And the question is the Club of Rome still part of the story? Now, you don't hear much about the Club of Rome being active today, but pulling crap off the internet, you get this feeling that you can make a case that the Club of Rome was part of a eugenics movement. And guys like Gates's father was a big eugenicist, and he seems to somehow, his policies and philosophies about vaccines and stuff seem to take you towards eugenics pretty fast. And so it's conceivable, that Deagle site, the Deagle site. The Deagle is a military site that has a bunch of statistics. And it's one of these sites that no one would ever go to because it's just about military shit. And there's a population page that has projections, and it has 2025 a projected 70% loss of population in the United States. And no one's ever explained it. So it's just on the site, DEAGLE. And it's not there, and it doesn't say we think this is going to happen or anything. It's just all of a sudden there, the table entry has 2 billion people or something. Not 2 billion, 50 million. I can't remember what the number is for the US and globally. It looks like a complete catastrophic loss of population. Why would the Deagle site put that there? What is it? Who knows what it is, right? Who knows how you prove something coming off the internet? That's what's driving me nuts. The Zoom call I was on today. So I told you before we started, I was on a Zoom call with a Department of Defense intel guy. He was a case officer, and I was fact checking him as he was speaking for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then I got to sort of pepper him with questions, and he was very convincing. At first, I'm thinking, okay, I don't know who this guy is, but then I start Googling him, and he's everywhere. He's omnipresent. He's on Fox News. He's on, he's the guy they parade out to talk about stuff. And the things he was saying were rather striking. He was unambiguous about his views. He said that he told Giuliani that they were going to rig the election. Giuliani didn't take him seriously, and then the shit hit the fan, right? This was an amazing discussion. At one point, I asked him about trafficking. Now, I've been obsessing over trafficking, and something like 85,000 kids coming across the border have disappeared in the last year or two. I never know if it's 1 year or 2 year, but it doesn't matter. That's a ton of kids. Where are they going, right? They're not going to trailer parks, right? These are not guys with vans that say free candy on the side picking them up. And if you start reading the various organizations like the International Union of Abused and Missing Children, these groups that supposedly care about missing children, the numbers that come out of 5 million a year globally come up missing, and you go, where are they going? And no one ever answers that question. They'll show traffickers and their archetypal slime balls with South American accents or something. But when it comes down to, you can even see them you can see stuff about how they get trafficked, but then at the end, you go, but where'd they end up? $1 million a year, let's say. Let's call it $1 million for laughs. And I think there's a tremendous amount of organ and blood harvesting. I think the adrenochrome story is real. It doesn't mean adrenochrome works. It means there's people who thinks it works.
Right. Mm.
I don't think as many. I listened to an interview of a guy whose voice was dubbed over, with voice distortion, and he was a trafficker, and it went on for about 2 hours, and he talked about how they'd pick up. First of all, they'd get mothers to give up their kid at birth, thinking they were giving up for adoption. In some cases, the mothers just wanted to get rid of the kid. They didn't care what happened to the kid. And what they would do is they would hang on to them. And they said the big payoff was harvesting. He called it parts. He harvested them for parts. And every last part of that kid gets used, just like in a slaughterhouse. But there's some who continue on in the sex trafficking world, and then if you start digging into that, you find that survivors of that pathway talk about the horrible things that happen to them, and they're not imaginable. They're so outlandish that you go, that can't be true. So I asked this CIA type today. I said, okay. I asked him about the trafficking. He starts talking about Epstein. I said, no, I don't care about Epstein. We all agree Epstein trafficked kids. They presented as though he trafficked sort of teenagers. And it's illegal. It's not good. But you also know there's a 15-year-old girl can agree to do something. She has some agency about it, right? She doesn't have to say yes. She does say yes. It's a terrible thing. But a 4-year-old can't, right? So there's really two different zip codes for these two crimes. Epstein was trafficking the kids, the little ones. We don't get told that because that would cause trouble. And so he starts talking about Epstein. I said, no, I don't care about Epstein. We all know Epstein was using it. And we know that the Mossad and CIA and all these guys cared about Epstein's product, which was blackmail material. So I'm talking about the other traffickers, the big, huge traffickers of young children. I said, let me ask you this, just to throw it out there. I said, is the Clinton Foundation into child trafficking? That's all over the place out there. He said, oh, absolutely. Without hesitation, he said, absolutely. Right. So once you get that answer, then you realize that a lot of the art importers and stuff, the import trade of artworks and stuff is child trafficking, money laundering, all sorts of stuff. And you discover, if you dig into this stuff, you discover just a super, super, super dark world that is, I would say most people couldn't entertain the idea. They would snap before they'd say, this is just nuts, get out of here, you're crazy. But if you kind of wade in one big toe at a time and you just work your way in, you discover that there are millions of kids missing and no one tells you where they go. And then when you start hearing about where they go and why, it's just truly horrific. And then I think Pizzagate's real. Unambiguously, actually. I one of those, would I bet, $1 million? Yeah, I think I would. There's too much direct evidence of it. Why is it still there? Why is no one calling them on it? Right? Because the whole system is corrupt. Collectively, there are people like Sidney McCain said, we all knew what Epstein was doing, and then she started stumbling because she realized that she could have spoken up, and then she starts stammering about how someone in position of power could speak up. Well, she was running an organization that should speak up, and I think Hollywood is just a bloodbath of pedophilia, just a bloodbath. So. The reason I dug into this is not because reading about pedophilia is fun. That certainly is not true. But I kept coming to this conclusion that there's this gravitational force, the way a physicist looking off into the galaxy would say, we're seeing things that we can't understand the movement, right? The orbits, the movements are not making sense. Then someone says, it's a black hole. It's a black hole, right? There's a gravitational black hole. And I keep seeing these black holes. And I say, something is causing people to leave that southern border wide open. Something is allowing Biden to sell us to the Ukrainians, sell us to the Chinese, and who knows who else, right? And no one is stopping him. No one is calling him out. The Republicans are AWOL. They should be hammering him for it. But you see it occasionally, like General Flynn. We know he's tied to Trump, so a lot of people think, therefore, he must be a terrible person. He's something like a three-star general. Right? This guy made it through a lot of cuts. This guy's got a lot of battle scars. And he's been hammering the Clintons on Pizzagate. And it's like, holy shit, when our three-star generals are calling out Pizzagate, there's something very odd. And then you, Carlo Vigano, there's actually multiple names in there, but Vigano, Archbishop Vigano is in the Vatican, very high ranker in the Vatican, huge in the Vatican, has come out and said, look, geopolitics was being run by pedophiles and by child traffickers and by drug runners. This is geopolitics. And the former Secretary General of the United Nations came out and said that pedophilia is the currency of geopolitics. That's what he said. And you go, and no one's saying anything. So now you reach a point, I've reached a point where, first of all, fact checking is impossible. You're going to find this stuff on sites that have a skull and bones at the top or something. You're not going to see it on CNN, which therefore you would know it was a lie because it's CNN. And you worry about the source being all the same source. So you worry that even though you can find all sorts of people confirming it. One time I was talking to a friend who's a big money manager in Europe, and he told me he bought GLD and then tried to liquidate it for $60 million worth of gold. And he couldn't get it. And he got a team of lawyers and they couldn't get it. I had read the prospectus. They don't promise to give it to him. So I didn't quite understand why he tried. But I told another friend, a fairly well-known blogger, you'd know him if I'd mentioned him. And then I watched that story circumnavigate the globe. Pretty soon it was on all the blogs. And I realized that I was the source. I go, if I'm the source, this is a sketchy story. Now, I asked the guy to confirm, and he actually said, yeah, I wrote about it back in 2000, whatever. No one noticed. So it was when I told someone that someone noticed, but then I watched it go around the globe. I go, that's how total bullshit can do laps around the globe. Now, it turned out to be true, but I shouldn't be the source. So I worry about this.
I mean, how can we not worry about it? We mentioned before the show.
Well, here's how not. Because I historically have written about stuff. I think in the back of my head, I had the sense that I could make a difference. This stuff, I can't make a difference. And what if I came out and I showed you beyond any reasonable doubt that Hunter Biden's laptop has young children on it? It would not make a difference. I think it does. And I think Anthony Weiner's laptop is filled with stuff that would, by reasonable standards, get a lot of people hung from the neck until dead. But it's not gonna come out. They're not going to accept it as having come out. Supposedly, the 9 cops who saw the contents of Weiner's laptop are all now dead. All 9. Right? How can I make a difference when that's the world? Right? It's like being in Russia and saying Stalin's killing people. Yeah, and what's your point? So I'm less confident that what I do, write, say is any good, in the sense that I might be speaking the obvious, but so what? I've had several people say, it's not making you happier, right? And you're not having an effect, maybe.
Well, ignorance is bliss.
Right.
I do think that, these efforts do contribute to the world, whether they affect change or not, incremental or not. I mean, that's up for debate.
Right.
What I'm really curious about, though, is how multi-generational then is this? And what I mean by that is, like, what kind of fight are we up against? I mean, is this already a 5-year, 100 project, an experiment? And curtain we've all been living on the other side of? Is this a 50-year thing? Is this an 8-year thing? Because like if this is a few people pulling some strings, it'll die out. But depending on the size of the project and the power behind it and the ability to pass it from generation to generation. I mean, you brought up sort of transhumanism and eugenicists, and I think about that power, like if you had that kind of power that we ascribe to the people who might be doing those things or subscribe to those beliefs, then I would think that they have the belief to either control the world in the future and affect change for either their children's, or they believe they're going to live for a really long time and see the change. It's like, why is Klaus Schwab being such a asshole and clown in front of the whole world if he didn't believe that this would benefit himself and I would think his heirs directly?
Let's pick a simpler case. Why would the Colorado Supreme Court throw its credibility right down the garbage disposal to make a decision that someone should have said, we should not be going here? Why would they do that? Because it wasn't just one bad decision. It illustrated that that entire Supreme Court's a bad joke. And so they were willing to do that. And then the woman in Maine, I can imagine one woman, but 7 legal scholars deciding that kicking Trump off a ballot was okay. Now, I have actually heard arguments for why it was legal. Forget about good idea, but why it was legal. And the argument comes down to, if you look at what the Constitution says about insurrection, it defines insurrection in a way that leaves enough wiggle room that you could do that in theory. Now, the problem is everyone in the world defines insurrection different than that. And so if you want to say, here's the definition of insurrection, and this is why January 6th is an insurrection, then I'm okay with that. But we all carry the definition, the working definition of armed insurrection, implicitly armed insurrection, right? And it wasn't. It's comically not that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when it happened, I thought it was so comical that it even gained traction, this story. I never even put the work into it because it just seems so farcical. My hypothesis, though, is that the money is so fucked up and so is being shredded at an ever-increasing rate that politics have to follow in kind. And you need both parties to participate. And so I see Trump more as a chaos agent and a heel, whether he knows it or not. I don't know if he's really running against the establishment. I don't think he's a savior, even if he thinks he's running against the establishment. We talked about sort of, it's really hard to tell the difference between reality and bullshit. I mean, like the other day, I'm watching Tucker Carlson interview Kevin Spacey.
It was surreal.
It was beyond surreal.
It was almost it was a parody.
Yeah, and I don't know. That I think is the way they can rationalize it. He's in character, but Tucker wasn't in character. And are they winking at us? Are they winking at the establishment? Because we all know Kevin Spacey's sort of history and drama.
Bastard.
Yeah,
a twisted bastard.
And then you buttress that up with, I just found out, I still can't mess up her name every time, Ghislaine Maxwell, right? So she was one of the earliest power users on Reddit. Like she was like the first person to like a million something. I don't know, I don't know how Reddit works. I was never really, and she was controlling and moderating a lot of forums, the ones you would think they would be interested in. And some even, they kind of unmasked her because she didn't have a handle that said Ghislaine Maxwell. And she was kind of unmasked, just like people kind of looking at records and when this person was online and when just other, things. And then a lot of people think that she was involved in the sale to Condé Nast because I think Epstein was. And you just think like, why is a media company like that interested in Reddit so early on? But just the fact that like someone like Ghislaine Maxwell, and like you said, I mean, Epstein, who cares? These people are just cogs. But the fact that maybe she's spending 12 hours a day on
Well, I don't think Epstein's trivial in the sense that I think he did important things that we should be appalled by. But the problem is I think that 2 things. One is they've reduced him down to a perv and his pimp who had an affinity for 17-year-old girls. And that's just not who he is. And in no way, shape, or form is that an accurate description. The second thing is if you think he is the whole problem, then they've really duped you. He is just a cog by that standard. He was an important cog. That's like saying, that Lenin was just a cog. But it's not to say that if you somehow believe that by Epstein killing himself we've solved the problem, that's ridiculous. What's that?
This is Robert Maxwell, Israel's super spy.
Yeah.
I haven't made my way through the whole book.
Looks like a big book. I would do it audio.
I don't know if you ever saw this one either. Trump by Wayne Barrett.
No.
I spent a really hard time tracking that down.
The other one I know of, I don't want to read it. But you know what? After Elon Musk said, "Go fuck yourself" to the world, which I thought was great. I'm now reading his biography. I have several family members who read it, who both endorsed it. But he basically said, "Go fuck yourself" to Bob Iger. Bob Iger's son is named Robert Maxwell Iger. Now, I think that actually is a coincidence because, first of all, Bob Iger is a Robert, so you've taken out the impossibility of it pretty fast. And apparently, there's some Maxwell stuff in his family. But I still find it funny, and I'm sure the internet's running wild with it. In fact, I know it is. But it seems like there's this gigantic web of power brokers that I think they've probably always been there. So why is it different now? And either it's because we're seeing it for the first time. Before, if Walter Cronkite didn't tell us the answer, we didn't know about it. Remember the good old days of journalism with, when Nixon got brought down by, Woodward and Bernstein. I remember thinking a little odd that it was CIA guys doing it in the Watergate break-in. What I found out fairly recently is that Woodward, before he was journalist, was CIA. So Tucker's argument is that the CIA brought down Nixon. And that makes sense to me, actually. I don't have any reason to believe it or not believe it. But, if the guy writing about it's CIA and the guy's doing the goddamn break-in are CIA, then why is this not a CIA operation, right? So this has always been there. So it's possible we're now seeing it because information travels. It's also possible the reason we're seeing it is because now that information is traveling, we are in a battle to the death for the control of that information. What we're seeing is the battle. And so, it'd be like they couldn't hide World War II on us because the battles were so big. Well, now the battles are big because it's no longer about, what was it called? What's the name of the CIA program to control the media?
MK Ultra you're talking about? Or
no, that's MK Ultra is the brainwashing. Operation Paperclip's bringing guys over from Europe.
Nazis maybe, or
yeah. A lot Ukrainians too,
and maybe they were allies. I mean,
now there's another program. It's a really well-known program. I'm just trying to blank. In any event, to control the media, and they've been controlling the media. They had propaganda going since the dawn of time, but now I think to control the internet.
You're talking about Mockingbird, then.
Mockingbird. That's it. To control the internet requires a sort of a brutality that's way beyond anything they did before. Because before they just had to get journalists to write the stories they wanted.
Right.
Now now we're all journalists. So now they got to shut us up when they don't like our stories. They got to make sure that no one can hear us when we try to speak. And so the censorship is now garish. I've read a lot about rising authoritarianism, which is what it feels like to me. And the two properties of a population that you notice when authoritarianism is rising is one is confusion. disorientation, and the other is demoralization. And you go, okay, we're 2 for 2 on that one. I listened to a Paul Harvey news show from 1965. You know how he used to go on the radio years ago, and he would tell some story. One of the classics was "If God Made a Farmer," things like that. And he did one where something, if I were the devil, and he described what he would do to destroy the fabric of America. And it was like he was describing 2023 to a T. 1965, Paul Harvey, devil. If you search that on YouTube or something, you'll find it. And he nailed every last shred of it. And he gets it in, he says, this isn't fiction. They're already doing it. This was 65.
Right.
So,
I mean, that makes me think of Yuri Bezmenov, the Russian, came and talked about sort of demoralizing populations.
But you never know if he's a plant.
No, I thought that too.
Yeah,
it had to be a plant. He would have been dead.
Remember when I dug into the Skripal poisoning, and the bullshit was flying like crazy when the Skripals got poisoned. And one of the Ruskies who wrote a book about who was an expert on these nerve gases, someone interviewed him and he said, well, it's Russian technology, and that's what I was arguing against. I said, look, these nerve gases are trivial to make. As a chemist, you look at them and you go, oh, that's the sophomore lab, except for they'd all die at the end. And someone says, well, why couldn't someone else make it? And he says, well, they don't know about it. And the guy says, well, it's in your book. And he says, well, I don't know who has my book. That was his answer. And I'm going, this is just getting comical. The two Ruskies who supposedly did the poisoning, the whole case fell apart. And finally, I ended up all over George Galloway. I was getting calls from Al Jazeera because I called him out. I called bullshit on him. So I did a couple George Galloway shows and stuff. And I had a number of news agencies trying to get me to admit on camera more than I knew. And I said, no, what I can tell you is any meatballs and organic chemist could make these nerve gases. They're trivial. 3 steps from dirt cheap material. You could literally take the 4 components. You could take the 4 components and Charlie, get out of here. You could take the 4 components and pour them into a big punch bowl like a fraternity punch. And it would be toxic as shit. And then finally, the Porton Down guys, the British nerve gas experts, they tried to get them to say it was Russian technology, and they wouldn't do it. Now, I might have made a difference there because they might have said, look, there are chemists out there calling bullshit on this story, right? I don't think we want to sign off on this story. But the Prime Minister of Great Britain or whatever it is, president, whatever the fuck it is, they were claiming, oh yeah, this is Russian technology. I go, yeah, just like vodka is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, talk about, a bullshit story. I mean, go back to JFK,
exactly.
and the story we've been fed.
Exactly.
And this is where, I didn't know Jack Ruby was Jack Rubenstein.
And that he was a product of MK Ultra.
Sure, but I don't know how, and this is probably a third rail, but I don't know how no one brings up Mossad as a potential aspect of this whole thing.
Well, they always do, but when you do, you're at risk of being called an anti-Semite.
Right. Well, I'm Jewish, so that'd be tough.
But. Well, you get. Well, but in the modern era, that doesn't protect you.
Sure, no, I understand, and it's
right. You can. I went to a free speech symposium at Cornell, free speech in the classroom, and there were almost no physical scientists, but I was interested in the question because I get step on landmines occasionally, and here are, gay, black, you name it, professors talking about how they're walking on eggshells in the classroom. I'm going, how the fuck are you not protected? And the reason is because while I'm teaching to chemists in training, and I could step on something that would piss off one of them, those guys are literally teaching to activists in training. So they're as afraid of the students as I am. I'm actually not afraid because I'm 68. And I got a couple gag orders this semester for just stupid shit stuff. And I found first time I said, look, opening day of class, I said, if you have a problem, just come and see me. You could write to the chair, the president, the dean. They don't care. I actually care. Just come into my office. Let's chat. And then after that lecture, someone complained. I go, what? Really? And so that I went to class the next day, and at the end of class said, I got a couple things I got to say. And I mentioned that someone had complained. I said, so here's what you should do. You should write to the chair, the dean, or the president. That's the right thing to do. Just do it. And by the way, I'm probably going to offend you again. You might as well drop the course. And the guy who brought me the information was trying to say, well, there'll be a wholesale departure from your course. I said, fuck him. Let him go. I don't care. They dropped the course because I said something that, by the way, I couldn't remember what possibly it could have been, besides the fact that I'm a bit of a legend anyways. So they're just offended by my existence. And I kept saying, fuck him. My pulse, my adrenaline was firing when the guy was telling me. He says, you got to stay on topic. I said, I didn't stay on topic today because I told him I wouldn't, because I got an 1.5 inch bladder stone that I'm getting taken out on Wednesday. And I'm sitting up here in fetal position trying not to die. My wife told me don't give a lecture. So I'm just kind of talking about the meaning of life up here and I told him that. And I told him about how to study. I told him all sorts of stuff. And they complained, not enough chemistry. I said, I fucking told them why there was not enough chemistry. I told them there was no fucking chemistry today because I got an 1.5 inch bladder stone sitting there in my gut. And I'm thinking, God damn these kids, right? And so then a couple of lectures later, the chair walks in. He said, we got a complaint. I said, what did I say? He didn't know. I said, you know how fucking stupid this is? You don't even know. He said, I got some complaint from some woman in the university. I said, I don't care. Now, my two colleagues made a fundamental mistake. They blew it. And I actually learned this in the free speech discussion that I went to. Their opportunity was to sit down with the kids and say, let's talk about how you should approach this. Right? But no, they just said, no, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll go shut up the guy. I'll go shut the guy up. By the way, forgetting about the fact that it's Dave, and Dave doesn't shut the fuck up. So I was very careful this semester. But once in a while I'd say something. I'd say, I'd throw out little blurbs, just little tiny bait out of the blue. I'd say, the military tracks its pilots' health because it's really important. I said, there's a 973% increase in heart failure by pilots in the military. What could that be? Right? And I'd throw that out there just to antagonize them, just to, and I'd say, and I'd say, look, I don't think the vaccine works. I'm sorry, but if they tell you to vaccinate, you got to vaccinate, but I don't think it's doing any good. I said the control group had a lower mortality rate than the vaccine group with Pfizer. That's fact. This is science. I'm telling scientists. I said, and I told them, I said, when I tell you things like this, I probably did this maybe 5 or 6 times. When I tell you things like this, the reason is because maybe, just maybe, you'll be reading an article that you normally would blow by because you think it's nonsense. But because I said something, you might say, I'm going to read that. Because I do know someone who thinks that to be true. And let's see. Did any kid out of 45 kids in my class come and say, Dave, could you give me something to read? No. They think I'm unstable. I told them climate change is bullshit. I said, give me an hour. I'll convince every last kid in this class that the climate change story is bullshit. It's complete and utter. It's the biggest hoax in the history of science, actually. No one asked me. So,
it's amazing. I mean, to cut you off.
No. I'll keep talking without periods and commas.
That's fine. It's just amazing how, you can't crack a joke. You can't push back on anything.
I do.
I don't mean you personally, but in society, it's walking around eggshells everywhere I go in structured, civilized society, I'll call it. Unless I'm with someone in the secret club, you can't talk about anything of these things that go against the grain. But I remember, growing up in the 80s, the 90s,
no one cared.
No one cared. You could either say that's a dumb thought and someone would dispute it, or you could admit to having a dumb thought, a dumb question, or maybe your dumb question might be validated because people would go, that's interesting, and then chase it down, and your dumb question is actually right.
But you didn't dismiss a friend because they had a different opinion.
Right. Along any of these lines. But people also could think critically for themselves and didn't run into fear when someone disagreed with them. I feel like what you're describing, everyone's running to mommy to kind of adjudicate these arguments. They don't argue back. They don't make a counterpoint. They're just like, Dave said the wrong thing to me.
Well, that's the Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff model in Coddling the American Mind. That's what they wrote about, the book Coddling the American Mind. I sent that book recommendation. You know how we all get recommended books? And it's like, I get too many of these than I can read. But I sent it off to the dean of freshmen, said, you ought to read this book. And he actually did. He wrote me back about 2 weeks later. He said, this is my day. This describes my day. And so the kids have been taught that you always turn to a higher authority to resolve your discomfort.
Well, I want to ask you what you think about what's going on with Bill Ackman. I mean, this is Harvard, MIT, Yale. This is plagiarism.
Okay.
This is, I mean, he's getting into the argument. I mean, he's trying to, one aspect of the argument that he made, and I haven't followed this closely either, but, just the impact that higher education has on society. And if we don't start taking the conversation there seriously, and, I mean, I would love to hear what you think about it.
Well, I've had strong opinions on this. First and foremost, colleges are receiving kids pre-damaged. These kids have been getting indoctrinated since daycare. And the whole process starts out with treat everyone well. Fine. Can't argue with that. Don't treat people badly because they're different color, they're whatever. Fine. Can't argue with that. But over the 12 years, the narrative starts getting shaped. And pretty soon they're getting you to endorse ideas that are really questionable ideas. Like, I don't think you should fat shame someone, but to say that being fat is healthy, that's just a load of crap. It's just bio gibberish, right? And I remember when transgender, for example, showed up in Northern Europe, actually treatment for it showed up in Northern Europe about 50 years ago. And they used to put the potential candidates for transgender intervention through a pretty good ringer to make sure that they were good candidates for it. So they'd say, you got to walk around, living the life, make sure you like what you're feeling and blah, blah, blah. And then we'll talk about it some more. They went through a lot of counseling and stuff. And now it's gotten to the point where you can basically, do a Zoom call and then get the treatment. That is wrong. That's just dead wrong. And, if and you say, well, the child, identifies as a whatever. And I go, yeah, well, there's anorexics out there who identify as fat. What do? You say, oh, yeah, you're fat. We support you being fat. No, you get to fucking help. Right. And I'm a believer that the parents have a lot of say, but there's also even a dotted line where you say, look, you can't take your kids and strap them up in the basement and beat them all day. Society's decided there are times where you have to intervene on a parent, right? And I just don't think, I don't think that biochemical and surgical interventions should be done on pre whatevers. And I don't know where the dotted line is for me, but it ain't 14. And what I do know is that 14-year-olds are pretty fucked up by any metric. You could be captain of the football team and think you're not cool. You could be the hottest chick in the school and think your butt's fat. And it takes you a while to learn to live in your own skin. And if a bunch of adults come along and say, well, I know you're unhappy, we can make you happy and give you huge kudos for going along with the plot line. Next thing you know, you're cutting off your breasts and getting your genitalia mutilated and getting chemically castrated. Now they've got this, if the parent doesn't support it, the parent gets thrown in jail or the kid gets taken away. What I can tell you is if I had a child and they, against my will, did this, I would do a sex change on that doctor. I would be ruthless. That doctor would probably not survive the ordeal. I would kill them. And there's got to be other people like that out there. I want doctors who do this I want them to hear this. I want the parents who, against their will, the doctors did something. This is actually one of the this is one of the conflicts in the abortion debate. Because when you give an abortion to a 14-year-old, I understand that there's kids who can't go home with this bad news. I get that, but there's a lot of bad news kids can't go home with. But by giving young girls, for example, an abortion at 14 without telling their parents, you also at some level, some percentage of the time, are hiding sexual abuse. You don't know if that 14-year-old got knocked up by a 15-year-old, then it's not the same as if Uncle Bob did it, right?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of real ethical problems here. The problem is the activist left. Their ethics have gone to shit. I'm calling you out. I think you're a bunch of fuckwits. And so I do podcasts with a lot of people. I do a lot of them with Jim Kunstler, who I've known for many years. And he makes passing allusion to having no friends left. And Jim, if you had asked me 10 years ago, who is Jim politically, I would have said, oh, he's distinctly left of center. Well, he's not now. And neither is Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or right. A lot of the guys who dig into these stories go, look, I would love to be left of center, but those guys are nuts. I now, ironically, am turning against corporate America and things like that. I'm right of center going, corporations are evil. The world has gone upside down.
Yeah, I remember you tweeted something out from Jeffrey A. Tucker, which was the reason I reached out to him, and we did a show called "The World Is on Fire."
Right.
That was my 1st
I've
show.
never communicated with Jeffrey.
But I think you tweeted something out that he had put out, and so
right.
I kind of look at your tweets closely, and I think about who you're interested in their ideas. So that kind of turned me on to him, just I guess coincidentally. And that was my first show taken down from YouTube for medical misinformation. And
oh God.
To get my channel back, I had to go through retraining and answer 7 questions on how to present an argument that fits. You can't disagree or go anything that against what the World Health Organization or local authorities say, which is
right, which is authoritarianism.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's the digital authoritarianism that you've been driving at. Back to RFK Jr. and the Kennedys, and I mean, you talk about one word we haven't used tonight, the Illuminati. And you hear about the 13 families, and I would think maybe the Kennedys are part of that. But I also want to turn, and he mentioned that Sirhan he thinks was part of the MK Ultra program. And I think about
he is positive that Sirhan didn't kill his father. He's positive, and as he describes it, it's a compelling case. Sirhan pled it out. He probably didn't speak English, so he probably pled it out much the way Stalin got people to plead it out. And Kaczynski, Unabomber, was MK Ultra. The other guy who was MK Ultra appears to have been Charles Manson. Jack Ruby, as you said, was MK Ultra tied. And I'm trying to think, one was on the tip of my tongue. So, I think Son of Sam was. Son of Sam has put out some quotes. I'm going, holy shit. That's not what I pictured from just a guy who's a crazy killer. And there's even reason to believe that John Wayne Gacy was affiliated with powerful figures. So,
And it makes me think of, because you mentioned before with Hollywood, and I do think that there's predictive programming. I mean, I see what appears to be evidence of it to me. It's hard to be definitive. Even movies like, Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and Julia
Roberts.
Some
really interesting ones. There's one called, is it Praise Petey? There's a new Disney cartoon. I think it's called Praise Petey. It's definitely Petey. And it's about a girl who inherits a maniacal blood drinking cult from her father. And you go, why are they doing this? Why would they put out a movie called Cuties where the girls are tweaking, little prepubescent girls are tweaking? The other one was
Monsters Inc. is like this.
Yes. Have you ever seen the 2012 Olympic ceremony? I think it was in London.
I think, I've looked into some of these with the imagery, and
so
oh, that looks like
creepy with
that. That's the one that
demons.
looks a lot like the demons and the vaccine and germs.
And there's kids in bed.
Yeah.
And oh, it's just creepy.
Well, it seems like every Oscars now and Grammys is a satanic ritual. Every Super Bowl halftone. I mean, the imagery and the coding messaging.
So then I'm sitting there going one day, I'm thinking, so I'm reading about satanic cults. It turns out, if the internet is correct, after filtering, the Venn diagram overlap of child trafficking and Satanism is very high. It's a huge overlap. In fact, the million kids who are missing, I think most of them, it's a blood harvesting process. I think a lot of them is blood harvesting,
which involves the torture for the adrenochrome.
That's right. You torture the kid, you crank up the adrenal function. The kid's adrenaline is going wild, and then you suck the blood out of them right at that moment, and then you do blood transfusion. I watched an interview of a guy.
And this is a Fear and Loathing Las Vegas is also like another movie about that whole adrenochrome and the.
I didn't know that. I keep
Fear
hearing
in Las
that.
Vegas. Well, the drug they're using that gives them the most effects is, I think, the adrenochrome.
See, I didn't know.
Maybe
that.
I'm wrong.
I didn't know that. No. I'd heard it, but I haven't seen it.
Great movie, otherwise. Awesome.
And then I'm watching this guy get interviewed. I recognize the interviewers. I'm going, have I seen him like on the higher tier channels on TV? Where have I seen him? Because they're not people I would have watched online, because I would have turned them off fast. But this guy's being interviewed, and he has a startup company that sells, quote, young blood. And I'm going, what the fuck is young blood, right? And he's talking about how therapeutic it is. And you can see the interviewers, again, who I recognize, and they're trying to work around the fact that they don't want to quite ask, where the fuck do you get young blood and how young? Because last time I checked, I don't think kids are giving blood at the blood bank. So what is this young blood all about? And they were dodging the question. And then it turns out I read another article that said, oh, by the way, he's wrapped up that operation. He's got another company, which is not just completely young blood. And I'm going, oh, fuck. And so the Clinton Foundation connection with child trafficking is pervasive. That's everywhere out there. And the data is good. The data is good. You would not want to have to make the case, the other case. You wouldn't want to have to steel man the case. And like Laura Silsby, for example, got caught trafficking children twice. One of them was with 33 kids, which is an awfully coincidental number. Makes a call into the Clintons, and she gets out of a Haitian jail. And now she works for Amber Alert. You want to find pervs, find an organization that whose apparent challenge it is to help children. And I think that's where you'll find the pervs. I think all these save the children.
All the foundations, and so many of them from Madonna.
I think they're all full of pervs.
They all have scandals.
Yes,
they all have
all full of pervs.
Scandals.
Disney has a terrible problem.
Well, I mean, I guess for them, they're able to sweep a lot of this stuff under the rug in the time being.
All of it, apparently.
All of it, right? Yeah. I mean, even Tucker Carlson, I think, the story I heard, he applied to be in the CIA, I think, back in the day.
Right,
I think that's on his wiki page. I went down sort of the 9/11 rabbit hole, and I was looking at sort of, it was like the Bushes are a crime family. I mean, they Bush Sr. controlled the CIA, and then they sort of co-opted the Clintons, and the Clintons' big thing that they were providing were the military air bases in Arkansas for all various different reasons.
Yeah, Mina, right.
And I think that they, sort of co-opted, the cartel down in Colombia to run cocaine back and forth.
If you listen to the talks given by recovered victims of the pedophilia rings, these are kids who got sort of shoved into the network when they were 5 years old and got massively raped for years. And then somehow pulled out, somehow got away, usually with help of someone, and then pieced their lives together after shaking the drug habits and the prostitution and the multiple personalities and stuff. They talk about the people who they were involved with. And it's very, very scary. They name people. They name Gerald Ford. They name Prime Minister of Belgium, the Prime Minister of Australia. They go down and they describe what was done to them, and it is unimaginably bad stuff. We are not just talking about perversions now. We are talking about skinning them alive. We are talking about making them eat a dead carcass. We're talking about some horrible, horrible things. And it's so bad that you're sitting there, you're trying to convince someone that the vaccine is dangerous and they can't get their brain around it. You say, okay, let me tell you this then. Hillary rapes children. And they're going to go, no. But then it turns out you start digging in and you find out that maybe Julian Assange is rotting in a goddamn prison because he released the emails of the Podestas and the Clintons doing, and Obama's doing terrible, terrible things. So I it's so bad that I spent hours and hours and hours reading about it, and I'm still trying to figure out, this is too ridiculous. So Satanism, I got off track. If you said to me 3 months ago, the biggest Satanist in the world, who is it? I would have said, oh, the most famous one is Marina Abramovic, right? And she is an overt Satanist. There's pictures of her. If you search her name, she's skinned goat's head, hold by the horn, sitting on a pile of carcasses, blood painted on the wall, guts, dinners that look like you're eating cadavers. She's an overt Satanist, and her buddies are all elite. You look at them, it's Madonna and Lady Gaga, and there's pictures of her with Hillary, and you name it. And I'm thinking, okay, Dave, you're just too deep. There's just something that somehow you've gotten duped or whatever. And then next thing I read, that Zelensky appoints her as ambassador. Now it's a term that I think it's a misnomer, but she was charged with running the school system in Ukraine, which is a famous child trafficking hub. I think the reason Ukraine's a famous child trafficking hub is, I think, because first of all, it's got enough third world flavor, you can get away with murder there, right? Second of all, they're essentially Russian kids. So they're Caucasian. And so if you want to scoop up all the kids from Africa you want, but people have various tastes. And a blonde 4-year-old might be a very attractive kid to the pervs. And I told you I was listening to this trafficker, and someone made some reference to scooping a kid off the street in the US. He said, no, that's not how it's done. He said that's not worth the effort. He says the second you scoop a kid off the street, first of all, you have an entire community trying to find the kid. You got the FBI trying to find the kid. He said, we don't need that.
It doesn't scale.
It doesn't scale. And now here's where I think they might have gotten a bunch. And this is something others have picked up on. The Lahaina fires. They were reporting the many, many hundreds of kids who died. If you go and look it up now, you can't find any evidence that they claim the kids died. It's a really weird, you go to Wikipedia and the Lahaina fire write-up is like, wait a minute, that's not the stories I was reading at all. And turns out Larry Sanger, the guy who founded Wikipedia, says it's totally a CIA PSYOP operation at this point. Anything of political importance in Wikipedia is totally owned by the CIA. And in any event, at one point, USA Today said there were 966 kids missing. You go to Wikipedia now, there's not even mention of a dead kid. The total fatality rate is 96 or something. And so then the question is, where'd they go? And there were some people picked up on the fact that the buses were missing from the bus garage, and they might have just been carted away and put on a ship and sailed away. That would be, and what it's called when there's a crisis, like Haiti's a big place. Haiti's a very popular place for this. But in Ukraine, or where there's an earthquake or whatever, it's called harvest season. You go in and you save the children. You scoop them up in the chaos. You cart them away. That's a huge source of the kids. Harvest season. And that's what the southern border is, harvest season. And there's videos of people driving vans up, but these are not skanky vans. These are guys where someone's filming, he says, who do you work for? And the guy's going, turn that camera off, turn that. And they're putting kids in the vans and carting them away from the border. And no one's stopping them. Except there's a guy in Congress, I can't remember his name, who's wailing on this. I can't remember his name. Kind of balding, kind of bald head, about 60 years old, and he is putting up some numbers. He's screaming at Congress. There's this woman named Rodas, R-O-D-A-S, who's down at the border and said, you just can't imagine the flow of kids coming through the border, being handed to people with no identification. And then the question is, are we really bringing people across the border to get them to vote? What kind of stupid idea is that? It's not about voting. I don't know what it is. And then the question comes down to the sleeper cell model. How many sleeper cells have been snuck in through that southern border? We get into a shooting match with Iran. Don't be surprised if shit starts blowing up all over the fucking country. All over the country. I ran into a guy who I suspected was North African based on what he said to me outside a convenience store yesterday, I think. And he spooked me enough. And I'm going, this is nothing compared to if I went to the convenience store and there were 20 of them. There's 20 of them, you don't pull in there. So if they drop a couple of busloads of these guys in Ithaca, it will completely and utterly change the town.
Yeah, you bring up the kids though, and you just run the numbers on this, and it can't be pervs in a basement.
It's not pervs in the basement.
It can't all be kidney transplants.
Nope.
The darkest tinfoil hat I've heard is McDonald's.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, I mean, but these are the deepest, darkest
crevices
on the internet. I mean, I let this stuff roll through my brain. I try never to think about it again.
That's too expensive. The McDonald's burgers are not worth that.
And maybe
much.
It's actually an advantage. I have no idea. But no, I get what you're saying. But going back, you mentioned something earlier that like this is a battle, what's happening on the internet. And countries are fighting, or organizations, institutions are fighting for information. And you think real battle, kinetic, you think war, and you could think 3, 4, 5 million people die. And Brett Weinstein was on Tucker, and he mentioned that the vax might have killed 17 million people.
That was a brilliant interview, by the way.
And I want to know your opinion on that number. And because when you think about it that way, and you think about it in terms of that's like one of the biggest wars ever. And I think it could shed some light on why we all feel so fucked up right now, or like we're going through a meat grinder. Because maybe in a way we have. It's just not as kinetic as other world events have been.
Well, the horror story is this idea of the grid going down. So a guy named David Tice, who's a friend of mine, he used to run the Prudent Bear Fund years ago. And every fall I run into him at a meeting I go to, and we sit down for a couple hours and chat. He created a documentary called Grid Down. It's not out yet, I don't think. And the narrator is Dennis Quaid. I watched Quaid do an interview, and Quaid has lost a few steps. I was watching Quaid, and he was laboring. He really seemed like a very old man to me. Too old. I know old men who are sharp as tack. So he looked like he had a little aphasia problem. But it would be so easy to bring down our grid. It would be so easy to bring down our grid. And I don't know why they haven't done it yet, but maybe it's because. And the other thing that's mysterious. So people say, well, the global elites want to get the population down to 1 billion. Now, I am fairly confident that if you brought the population down to 1 billion in less than at least a century, the entire fabric of society would tear apart, and there would be no winners. There would be no winners. There would be no one to fix your cell phone. There would be no one to do anything. The whole thing, there would be some point where the system just ceases to function. Right? It's kind of, it feels like it's almost there now, right? We were talking about the healthcare system and stuff, where I probably made 15 phone calls to get a CT scan sent from Ithaca to New York City. It was just ridiculous that I kept, and they kept saying, well, send it this way, send it that way. And it drove me bananas. So to the extent that things break now, take out 80% of the population, nothing will work. I mean, it's like taking out 80% of the parts of your car, right? It's not gonna drive very far. And so I don't believe the elites could be that stupid.
Okay. So can they maybe still going in that direction though? Can they get us all into 15-minute cities and get us?
I don't even know what a 15-minute city does for them. What do they get out of a 15-minute city? I agree.
Well, but that kind of. Well, I don't know if that's what they want, but the idea is like, you're trapped. You can't, use your car too much. You can't go very far. And I just think that is very limiting on people's lives in terms of commerce.
So what do they gain? What do they
gain? Control, I guess.
Right.
I see what you're saying there.
Well, but except Stalin gained nothing by killing 40 million people. He still did it. So it's not an argument they're not trying to do it. I'm just trying to figure out if there's actually a rational gain.
Well, I guess when I say 15-minute cities, I think it's also a euphemism for you will own nothing and be happy.
Right. And
so it's more about a lack of sovereignty. You'll be less mobile. You'll have less assets. You can't decide when you want to get in your car and go. So however they get there, whether it's enforcing a 15-minute limit on your travel, or how much carbon you can emit, or whatever, or you need the right mortgage score to go on the train or go to work. And
there's so many people now who think that's good. The indoctrination. This is not just Klaus Schwab saying this.
Right.
These are wingnuts. These are. I don't think this is. See, the problem is, revolutions come from the left or the right. They have slightly different flavors. They're really the same thing, but they have slightly different flavors. And this one is definitely coming from the left. This is a socialist-driven one. And there's people who somehow think it would be a better world if we were told how much meat we could eat. We were told how far we could drive, and if we couldn't drive very far. I'm going, no. Now, I also could imagine that there's people in very high places who are sort of looking down with all the data at their fingertips, saying, on the path we're on, we're going to run out of lithium, we're going to run out of potash, we're going to run out of the oil, whatever. There's a hot debate going on right now about peak oil again. That's been recharged again. And so I can imagine people in high places go, we have to somehow get ahead of this. We're just going to run out of resources. And what I can tell you is the spooky part of the story is that, every piles of millennia, we get ice ages. They just cycle. We're inter ice age period right now. We're in a warm period between two ice ages, by definition. We have one chance to get this right. Because if the ice age comes back and we haven't solved the problems technically, then when they come out the other side of the ice age, there's going to be no oil, no coal, no iron, no nickel, none of the things that we could pull out of the ground dirt cheap, because we already did. And so now, does it have to do with you or me? No. But it is odd to think that there's this dip in there's this warm period between two ice ages in which civilization has to really anchor itself, really get a hold, or we'll go back to hunter-gatherer and never to return again, because we have used our resources. So I'm a big resource depletion guy.
Oh,
I'm an
I think I'm on the
environmentalist.
opposite end, and I'm going off. I'm reading Seyfuddin Ammus's latest book, Principle of Economics,
Yeah,
and he talks about the only real true scarcity facing human nature is time, our time. The more time we put into anything, the more we can get of anything. And one way he looks at it is that if the Earth is a swimming pool, like let's say like an Olympic-sized swimming pool, the amount
right.
of resources we've taken out already would be
It's
the
trivial.
equivalent of like a half a cup. And
Well,
so
I can
like
imagine that.
yeah, and so he said it's just a matter of time. If we want more gold, we just have to put more energy into it. Energy, our time, our effort is limited. But
Well, but if you look at where, for example, if you look at the energetic cost of getting energy, it's clearly gone way up.
I would think technology is driving that down or just on a
But
downward
it's
trend.
not though. It's
But
not though.
so do you believe
The
oil is
energy input.
limited? And I want to follow that, but do you think oil comes from dinosaurs?
Well, it doesn't come from dinosaurs. It
Okay.
comes, I think, it comes from sediment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's sediment. But I don't know. And I know a smart guy. I know smart guys now are starting to reevaluate the abiotic oil theory.
I don't know what that
And
is.
that's a theory that the oil is not from dead organisms of any kind. That it's being generated in the earth.
Wouldn't that indicate replenishment?
Yes, yes. But I haven't seen anyone who's presented the case that's convinced me.
Hmm.
So we apparently isotopic distribution, which I do not believe C13, C12 will do it, or C14 or whatever, because it's too short a time scale. But I think isotopic distributions have not found evidence of abiotic oil. I think that the scientists using whatever isotopic tricks they use have concluded that so far all the oil pulled out of the earth comes from organisms. That's the claim. Now, they could be full of shit because we've seen them be full of shit for the last 4 years. We watch them be full of shit on the climate change story. And so I don't doubt the possibility that we've just gotten that dead wrong. Now, the other thing is, I think, we bring nukes back. The nukes could save us. No question. No
I think it is
question.
the answer.
It is the answer, right? So anyone who's a climate change catastrophist should be a huge fan of nukes. And there's some who are and some who aren't. The ones who aren't are just morons. They're just cultists.
Right. Well, I mean, I want to bring up another one. Another, maybe, I don't know if it's third rail, but like chemtrails. So
Yep.
I even remember just being a kid looking up at the sky and not understanding how these planes were leaving marks. And just not, I think that, you talk to the last 4 years, I think we're finding out that so many things we've been told are not what they are or are true. And some of them just don't even, I just think about that childlike wonder where I'm like, I don't believe that. And then, after 40 years, you believe it or you just don't question it anymore. But
So
I'm
the chemtrail stories.
questioning everything. And I think kind of what we were talking about before, I think it's okay to question things, even if you question something and are then shown to be wrong or
Right.
stupid, like it's okay to question things.
Well,
But the more I look up, I see these
Aristotle
lines that don't make sense.
Aristotle is quoted as saying an educated man can entertain an idea without endorsing it. Now, that comes from the internet, which I'm pretty sure Aristotle didn't put it up there.
Right.
But it's a good idea even if it's not true.
Right.
And I dug into the chemtrails as part of getting into directed energy weapons. And it strikes me as possible that the chemtrails are actually a DEW, directed energy weapon defense mechanism. And that is to say that if you have a satellite laser, so I dug into the DEWs. They are absolutely real. It's basically Reagan's Star Wars. The things that I could read were, 30, 40 years old and unclassified. So whatever you get that's 30 years old and unclassified is just a tiny, tiny, tiny foreshadowing of what we have. But you can find RAND reports and Department of Energy reports and PhD theses and things like that coming out of the war colleges and stuff. And they're very real. They're very real. And you can see, Secretary of Defense saying, China's got some serious DEWs that are remarkably destructive. But you don't know how destructive. And what the way I try to convey to the reader that, okay, if you don't believe this, don't worry about it. And I said on August 6th, 1945, what seemed implausible became fact. And that's when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. So no one would have believed that you could wipe out an entire city with one bomb. But we did. And so we don't know what they have. Now, one of the possibilities is that it's very hard to get a laser or a maser, which is a microwave laser, from space down to Earth without the atmosphere fucking up the thing. And so they actually have some cool tech. Again, 40-year-old technology here, where they shoot one pulse through the atmosphere and it kind of burns a hole through the atmosphere. And then the second pulse follows right behind it, goes right through that hole. Now these are picosecond sort of timescales. And then I was reading some stuff about nuclear powered DEWs and how many megatons of power you could get through, to the target. And I couldn't quite wrap my brain around it, but I was left with a sense that if they've made great progress, it's quite possible they could destroy anything they want. And I think the best potential example of a DEW in action, I got started on it with the Lahaina fires when people started saying, oh, those are DEWs. And I could deal with that. And one of the ground-based DEW installations, one of two supposedly, in the US is in Maui. So you go, well, that's convenient. But that's when I started reading about to see if these were plausible assertions. And then I got onto the fires in Quebec, and there's this really interesting satellite video of the fire starting in Quebec. And there's about 25 fires that all start simultaneously. I say, oh, those are lightning strikes. I go, they were really simultaneously. And so if you watch, I did a few freeze frames. It didn't quite capture it. If you watch the video, all of a sudden these 25 plumes just start showing up on satellite all simultaneously in a buckshot pattern that's about 350 miles across. So you say, well, maybe some, arsonists, climate warrior arsonists spread all over Quebec and said at 12 o'clock sharp, we're going to light a fire. But maybe something in space just went zap, 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 zap. And then I ran into this funny thing where some guy in the RAND corporations, they said, they were talking about how they're very color sensitive. And I knew this to be true, but they're talking about Lahaina where blue cars were not getting burnt and other cars were, and blue umbrellas were not getting burnt and other umbrellas were, and things like that. But then some guy in the RAND corporation said that's preposterous. I go, wait a minute, the guy's lying now. So I called a laser jock up and say, look, I just got to ask you, can you easily sort of with a laser light one color on fire and leave the other color behind? He said, oh yeah, that'd be no problem. And so then the question is, then why would the guy from the RAND Corporation deny it? So it was this seemingly white lie that kept me pondering whether Lahaina was legit or not. And there's a bunch of funny things with Lahaina that are all wrong, kind of like the Skripal poisoning story. But the Quebec fires were the ones that really caught my attention because these 25 or so fires all started all at once and in too big a region. And so, and then there's a guy who's called a forensic arborist, whatever that is. I didn't know that was a job. And he looks at which trees burn and which ones don't, and they don't make sense to him and stuff. And so he can make a very fun story. But I don't even know how we got onto this. I should probably just get off it. But
we're talking about fossil fuels and chemtrails.
Oh yeah. Oh, so the chemtrails, it turns out, could be. If you wanted to defend against the DEW, you put particulate matter in the atmosphere. Now, the other reason I read about it is because there's clowns out there who are dangerous clowns, like John Wayne Gacy clowns, who want to blanket the earth with like an umbrella so that the sun can't heat the earth to stop climate change. I go, so let me see if I got this right, guys. You want to put this big cloud over the earth to prevent the earth from heating up, while at the same time we're supposed to use solar panels to collect the energy. Is that really Is that really your story? And it turns out all the alternative energies besides nukes all require good weather, predictable good weather. And so the whole story's stupid. Windmills, especially. The windmills seem particularly stupid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and they kill birds and insects and
But
have their own
even that, they're
environmental
just
issues.
they're just not efficient.
Right. But I mean, what do you make of the DEWs? Is it just sort of, the military has new technology and they tested it? I mean, it's kind of, to draw the sort of the connections between the military capabilities with the DEWs and child trafficking. And I mean, that's a lot of interconnected.
I'm not sure the DEWs connect with any of those other things. If I were running the military, I would be looking into DEWs. Right. It would just be defense, right? It would just be part of my defense. That would be a responsible thing as a Defense Department tech wizard.
What kind of situation are we in, though? Like, I assume if we have it, then China has it, Russia has it, other powerful entities have it. And you were saying you could do cloud cover and protect yourself, but then they could just zap a hole and destroy New York City. I mean,
not if it's aluminum particles. That would be a harder hole to zap. And then they could just sit somewhere else. I keep hearing these rumors that we're behind in this race. And it's really appalling if
like in around fifth gen, like electronic warfare. Things like what, Havana syndrome?
Yeah, that's potentially a DEW. Because it's potentially
but it's not a laser that like burns things. It's
no.
Frequency waves and messing with people's minds or something. I don't know what it is.
Well, if the right frequency would get in your skull and potentially, if you stuck your hand in a microwave oven,
right,
you'd feel pain right away.
So what'd you make of those stories making it to the news?
Well, anything they're telling us, they want us to know for a reason, and it's not good. So I think the UFO stories are coming out because they're getting better and better, cool tech, and they've got to have a cover story. So I think that the UFO stories are all a cover story for shit they're developing.
And do you think there's a thread from 9/11 to Lahaina that might involve DEWs or something else?
Well, yeah. Yes. Actually, one of the things that got me on it too is that there's a woman out there named Judy Wood who points out things that happen at 9/11 that just don't make sense. And the two that really, she gives like a 2-hour and 30-minute talk on it and another 45-minute talk. There's not too many. The 9/11 truthers don't like her theory. It could be a turf war where they have their theory, she has her theory, and they don't want her theory. I don't know, but she claims that there's things that she can't explain them, but she's just trying to understand what actually happened, not why. And one of the things she, in a bulleted list, I would say there were a bunch of cars that burned for no apparent reason. And Lahaina was filled with burnt cars, and these fires are filled with burnt cars. And so the DEW crowd who thinks the cars are burning for a reason, all point to, would point to this. And so she showed a scatter plot of where all the burnt cars were in 9/11. And I must admit, buildings falling and burnt cars don't necessarily go together. The other thing that I remembered from the very beginning, from within a day or two of 9/11, or within some number of weeks at least, it was the guys who were digging through the rubble said there was nothing left. They said, we're not even finding cell phones. We're not finding anything. We're not finding pieces of phones. We're not finding anything. And that makes no sense to me, because I don't care how hard you step on a cell phone, you're still going to have some cell phone there. There were something like 42,000 filing cabinets, and they didn't find filing cabinets. Now, I don't care how heavy that building is. The filing cabinet might be flatter than a pancake, but it's still going to be a filing cabinet. And so she refers to the thing as dustification. Now, she gives it that name because she doesn't want to anchor people on a known. She says, I don't know what this is. Whether she was knowingly doing this or not, I don't know, she was circling around the DEW story. Now, she shows, and in my write-up, I actually show a 5-frame still frame of dustification. And if it's really of legitimate footage, which I tried to find a totally different angle to see if I could see the same thing happening from someone else's camera. But I didn't have the patience to keep looking. But it's very mysterious. There's these girders and stuff sticking up in the air, and then they just kind of go to dust. They just go to dust. And the question is, what would do that? And so then she points out that the pile of debris from 110 stories of two buildings failed to reach the top of the lobby of the buildings, which is probably 2 or 3 stories because it's a tall lobby. But they failed to, and I'm talking 110 floors. There should be quite a steep. I was always troubled by the fact that the building fell so perfectly, right? And then, of course, Building 7, then the Pentagon. Yeah, the whole story falls apart. But she said the building is missing. I mean, there's not enough. The pile is too small, and then again in some of these documentaries, you see guys saying, we didn't find anything. We didn't find pieces of anything. We didn't find, and so you're going, is there a weapon that looked like something out of Independence Day, where the thing comes right overhead of a building, just destroy? I don't know. Yeah. It's total science fiction, but I can't rule it out. And so I went there and I hit all these topics. My brother said, you're going to sound like Alex Jones, but Alex Jones is getting a second wind here now too, because people go, I just watched a show on TV today about the drug, the chemical atrazine put out by Novartis that they spray on fields, and it actually causes hermaphroditic frogs and stuff. And Alex used to talk about gay frogs and stuff. And that's what this was about. And the guy who discovered this, they slammed his career into the basement. And what he did is he got independent funding, independent of the agencies, and he redid the research so he could publish it. So he wasn't restricted from publishing it. And now they're admitting that it's having serious problems with sex organs, which could explain gender problems and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember being down. I was not down by 9/11 3 or 4 days after, and I just remember all the black dust floating in the air. It would just collect on your body. And I do know what you're saying. Like, there was nothing left of those two buildings. No people were found. No, like, very few bodies.
There were 1,500 people who didn't get identified.
Right. They found a passport from a hijacker
within a day. Well, that we knew was bullshit, right? That tells you they knew something ahead of time.
Right.
But it could be something as innocuous as we were tracking them and we blew it, right? So if you had a beat on these guys, you go, holy fuck, I didn't know they were going to fly into the building, right? So that, but that was a bald-faced lie, right from the start when they found Muhammad Atta's passport.
So these things are vast and hard to comprehend, and let's say on the macro level. But what did you make of the saga of Daniel Penny? I mean, that's on the micro level. I mean, that could happen to any one of us in an individual moment. It's not, what happened to New York City or a country.
Yeah, I'd throw the prosecutor in jail. I'd prosecute him. Daniel Penny did nothing wrong. I wrote a lot about Daniel Penny, and
well, maybe you could start with what is it like? I mean, how is physical intervention a serious step into darkness?
So the guy gets on the subway, says, I'm going to kill everybody. He says, I don't care if I die. I don't care, blah, blah, blah. The guy had been arrested 44 fucking times, right? So this guy was about as pristine as George Floyd. And so Daniel Penny waits. He's an ex-Marine. He waits. There's a black guy with him. I can't remember his name, but they decide to move. Now, what I do know is when Jordan Williams, when you do a physical intervention on a guy who's a crazed beast, you're fighting for your life. You're not just, giving him a half Nelson. And so when you do that intervention, you have to be ready to kill him if you have to, right? It's just that simple. And anyone who says that's not true, well, I don't want you protecting me because you might have to kill the guy. Now, I don't think Daniel Penny intended to kill the guy. put him in a chokehold. They said it was 15 minutes. I timed it. It was 90 seconds. And then there was some gasping he did. But I don't care. I don't care if he killed the guy. I don't care if he put a rope around his neck and choked him to death. The guy came and said he was going to kill people. So that's it. That's game over for him. And so then they prosecute Daniel Penny without prosecuting Jordan Williams. Then they realize, oh, we've got a problem here. We just prosecuted one guy, not the other. And then we've got optics. Well, let's round up Ray Epps and that other guy and let's prosecute the two of them. And then they dropped all charges against Jordan Williams. Meanwhile, Daniel Penny's in a fight for his life. So I would charge the prosecutor with treason. I'd find some fucking way to call it treason. I'd throw him in jail for 20 years. Just zero. Because because that one total fuckhead, complete sack of shit piece of garbage, no one's going to intervene now. There's no way you're going to intervene. Let the guy die. Let him shoot everyone, right? Because they'll just come after me. Now, it happened to be the same guy who was prosecuting Trump. Same prosecutor. So it's clearly just politics. So the J6 story drives me bananas. Daniel Penny drives me bananas because I think that what Biden has done with the DOJ is it's Stalin, it's Lenin, it's Mao. It might not be quite as violent yet, but I think Biden's administration is filled with treasonous bastards who should be tried for treason and sent to jail for many, many years.
Do you think any of that's going to ever come close to happening? Or
no chance. No chance. Because the Republicans obviously are not going to do it. Who's going to do it? Unless Trump gets elected.
And do you think that has any possible?
No, they'll cap him before he does.
Okay, so let's say, so then what happens? What's the alternative then? Is it a Biden re-election? And before we get to that, I mean, just along Daniel Penny, it kind of reminds me of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yep.
And that couple in St. Louis.
Kyle, you could kind of imagine where the case would come from.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah,
right?
there's different
Penny, you
context
can't.
and stuff.
Penny, you can't.
But basically, the message is don't, protect yourself, don't protect your community. And I get the whole idea of avoid a fight. I mean, that's what, you
right.
don't want to get in. Right.
But he did. He waited quite a while before they decided to make a move on him.
Yeah. And I think this goes deeper than that, because you can walk away from a fight that you might be involved in, but this is like, don't help your neighbor.
Right.
Right. So then, what is your take on the 2020 election?
2020? Well, it's totally rigged. Totally rigged.
Okay, when you say that, though, a lot of people say that the Kennedy election was rigged in 60.
I agree.
And so this is nothing. Is this nothing new under the sun?
I've made that case. In fact, I think the election. I think Bush had Diebold was the voting machine company when Bush ran, and I think they had Diebold in their pocket. The difference
we've been hearing about this. Yeah, for
the difference here is that both parties wanted Trump out. So the previous riggings were two parties playing capture the flag. And so they were each trying to outgame each other. And so it's like I don't know if you play lacrosse, anyone who's refereed a lacrosse game will tell you there's no such thing as a clean face off. They're all trying to cheese the ball that face off. And so you say, look, it comes out in the wash somehow. Right. So I don't worry about the hanging chads with Gore versus Bush. I did not vote for Bush the second time because he got us in a catastrophic war. And I said, unforgivable. And so that stuff bothered me. But it really seemed like it was just two parties just battling, playing very dirty, and they both knew it. But the Trump one was much more about both parties trying to get a guy out of there. And he was a guy who the populists picked. Right? They said, fuck you, we're not taking your cue now. So in the primaries, they tried to get him out of there. They tried to give free primary votes to Cruz and various things. And Trump just mowed his way through all of them. And then he mowed his way through Hillary. And Hillary was such a terrible candidate. I don't think we should elect a child trafficker as a president of the United States, for starters. But
I think on
They,
paper, for the left, especially, I mean, she was a great candidate.
except she's really unlikable, and
Yeah.
she had a lot of baggage. Trump went at it too. Trump went at it.
That's what's interesting about Trump. I mean, what do you think of his competence level? So I think maybe it's possible that he's a heel. Maybe, they didn't want him
Yep.
in. Maybe they want him out, but I don't think he's necessarily, an outsider per se, or
I don't know.
not a
I
tool.
just don't know.
I just don't know.
He might go Green Goblin on him this time. The things they've done to him this
Well,
time.
now I agree. They both don't want him back, whether they wanted him in or didn't want him or used him or didn't use him. They don't want him in now. I agree with that.
Right.
The irony is, I think the last time it wasn't Lincoln not on 16 ballots, state ballots, and it was the Democrats
Right.
who kept him off then. The irony there, and you talk about the democratic aspect of, we won't even let you vote for who you want. We think we're so right.
Well, the Democratic primary system is more corrupt than the Republican. Those special ballots, the 30%, ballots from the elite, is just an inexcusable protocol. So 30% of the ballots for the primary, the Democratic primary, are handed out to political elites.
Right.
And that means that you'll never get an outsider in there. Bernie had no chance. He was never going to get it.
I mean, so this is coming at us fast, though. I mean, I can't imagine a Biden re-election, but I don't see a Trump election. I don't know if we're going to get a wild card like Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. I don't see an RFK Jr. really making a strong push. Or
they would have to decide to do RFK because they didn't think they had a better play. There would really have to be some soul searching inside the Democrats and say, look, we're going to go with RFK. We got to get Trump out of there. If the Democrats went with RFK, he'd win, I think. I think he would.
Yeah, I do. I just don't think that's in their wheelhouse to...
No, it isn't, because they don't.
And he's not really a Democrat. I think his family has a Democratic history. I don't think he's running.
Well, he fought against regulatory capture and stuff. So he fought for the little guy. He really is a Democrat.
Yeah,
old school.
I guess, the whole meanings of the party is kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't even know what I'm saying this in that regard. I mean, it feels like he's running as a renegade.
Well, he is.
And
because the Democrats have now. So
and I just don't see the Democrats accepting a renegade. So maybe that's
it's like
why
a spar. It's like a spar. So the two fighters are working around each other. And so now, if you'd asked me what's the Republican, I would 20 years ago, 30 years ago, so well, it's going to be a rich guy, it's going to be a banker, it's going to be Silicon Valley, it's going to be the guys with wealth and power. It's not going to be the redneck. It's not going to be the union guy. Now it's flipped. Now the Republican Party is the rednecks, the union guys, Richmond, guys who sing about Richmond, north of Richmond. And the Democratic Party is Silicon Valley, Wall Street, big money, and lack of free speech. And so the two parties, in some sense, have swapped roles. And then, oddly enough, I didn't switch parties. I now support the Republican Party. So I have changed. The two parties have changed. And I basically followed my changes followed the Republican Party around to the redneck side. And, but I think if they go with Biden, I look at Biden and he's such a truly wretched candidate.
I don't know if the country sees what you see, though, or
I don't
I'm just being trying to be like objective here. Like I
know.
I mean, I think they see him as an old man who's doing his best.
They don't look at Ukraine and say, "What are you doing with our money?"
I don't think so. I don't know.
They don't think he's taking kickbacks from China. They don't.
No, I don't know if
they don't
think about that.
Any of these people,
and I think a lot of people
do. Girls.
I think a lot of people do. If they think any of that stuff, they say the other side does it too. So
that's how you rationalize it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the old joke in Chicago, like no fair. I only got to vote once.
Right.
So
I think he's a truly wretched candidate. I had no problem with Obama. I didn't like his politics, but the guy seemed to have his shit together. And when he was at the podium, no one was better at the podium than Obama. Clinton wasn't as good as Obama. And
Why can't they find someone? And I say the they is because I'm not a part of either party. I'm
well,
not
it's a
trying to.
DNC. It's
But
the
why can't they
DNC.
find someone like Obama that would be more palatable with a, has a little bit longer runway?
Well,
Is it that hard?
I don't know, but what I can tell you is that what they've convinced me is they don't have any sense of obligation to offer up a candidate who's a qualified candidate.
I agree with that. And then somehow he's going to get the most votes ever in history.
I could find 150 people in the city of Ithaca that's more qualified than Biden.
Right. Jerry Springer.
Jerry Springer, for Christ's sakes. He
has mayoral experience.
Even Buttigieg, who's a lightweight, and not Kamala, she's too lightweight. She's too lightweight. But there's if the Democrats don't have anyone better than him, then the whole party should just give it up. And so they have decided that they're going to hand us a complete sack of shit and then use completely dastardly approach to get him elected. Or they've already decided to get him out of there. But that's what they did the last time, too. They had to know he was losing his marbles. They had to know he's a perv. They had to know he's a compulsive liar and a criminal. They had to know all of that. I mean, he had to bow out of a presidential election years ago because he got caught lying about stuff left and right. Yet somehow they decided that they would go with him instead of, say, Elizabeth Warren. Now, I knew Elizabeth Warren years ago. We used to chat late at night by email. Yes. We used to exchange emails late at night. And I have issues with her politics. She took to politics like a duck takes to water, a little too, the woman I thought I knew is not the woman who's there now.
Well, I think we all thought of her differently back then, too. Maybe I shouldn't say,
right.
I'm not speaking for anyone.
But she seemed like kind of just a populist, a person who cared about the little guy, and a person who recognized the banks were a bunch of crooks. How can you argue with any of that, right?
Loved it.
And even if you accept her for what she is now, she's so much better than Biden. In terms of, now, forget about the politics. As a Republican, she might not be to some Republicans, but it's just a human being, person capability stuff.
But I guess we're going back to my theory. The candidates have to get worse. The money's getting worse. Everything has to get worse. It has to get more dramatic. It has to be a bigger food fight. Obama was a food fight. He pissed off. Just the way he looked pissed off.
But he was an engineered candidate from law school.
And they engineered the hate. Maybe they engineered the hate, but they wanted the hate.
But they did a great job. With Biden, they're not even doing a great job.
Maybe that's part of the rubbing it in our face.
I think that's right. So it's the demoralization. If you reach a point,
and how do you explain the ineptitude of everything in the country?
Hyper-normalization.
Right. I mean, the Afghanistan blunder.
Oh, so I talked to the guy today.
The border, student loans, all these things are massive blunders.
My Zoom call today with the guy, with the DOD case officer.
Right.
He spent a ton of time in Afghanistan. He said we spent 2 years in Afghanistan winning and 18 years losing. And he said we should have gotten out of there real fast. And he said and then I said, okay, tell me this. The pullout was so bad that it was intentional? He said, absolutely. He said, yeah, we handed them all the money, we handed them all the weapons and said, don't embarrass us. Now, the interesting thing, and what convinced me that was the case, is remember all the Americans who couldn't get out? Remember, there were so many Americans who couldn't get out, and they said, well, we got 90% out. And I go, 90% is not a good number. It might be good on a calculus exam, but it's not very good on getting Americans out of a war zone. And they said, and so there were tons and tons of Americans. Did we read any article about any of them getting hurt? Any of them getting tortured? Any of them getting... And the reason is because we said to the Taliban, do not make us come back here to rescue Americans. If you want us to come back here, we will. Or you let the Americans get the fuck out. Don't fuck this up. And the Taliban, they might look like they're backwards, but they're not stupid. they're going to go, sure, we will help you get the Americans out. We want the country. So we left them money, weapons, everything. We left them the country, said, don't make us come back, which means don't hurt Americans. And they didn't. So it was an intentional bad pullout. And we pulled right out and went straight to Ukraine.
I mean, I wonder about that force, and I want to touch on the Middle East, soon, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think of someone like Noam Chomsky?
I think so. I wouldn't have liked Noam Chomsky most of my life. I think he started to make sense to me much the way George Carlin started to make more sense to me. And then I think in his old age, he developed some bad ideas. And I can't even remember, but some of them, like he was really militant about vaccinating and stuff. And that was not the Noam Chomsky that I had gotten to understand. And so I think he was, I don't know, losing his marbles, getting grumpy. I don't know what. Taibbi adores Noam Chomsky, but it was the old Noam Chomsky.
And what about Stephen Hawking? Because he was mentioned in the Epstein files, and
what can Stephen Hawking do?
Well, maybe I don't know. They told me that Stevie Wonder is blind. And I see videos of him catching mics and waving at people.
This can't. It's got to be. I mean, it's got to be. He's got to be blind. I think Stephen Hawking's
legally blind.
Got to be a blob. The more interesting one is if Michelle Obama's a dude. That's a fun one.
Yeah, it's a fun one. It makes you think. I think she would be a perfect candidate for the Democratic Party. And
because they can't. They can't let it. I don't think they can let it out though.
Right, that's what I mean. Aside from that,
yeah,
if she was a
transgender, they'd love her. Love her.
It's there. Now I know that she's always said that she didn't want to run. That's not a new thing.
Well, but I was told by someone who knows her personally, said she doesn't want to campaign. She would like to be president. So if she rides in on a white stallion at the last minute, that would be exactly according to script.
Do you think that story, the Big Mike story, would actually come out in a way that would be a mainstream question? Or would it be?
No, I think what'll happen is Biden can't leave the White House, because then Kamala becomes the incumbent. And if she becomes the incumbent too soon, she develops power from it. So if they're going to bring in Michelle, they got to bring in Michelle after Kamala has not rode on the back of incumbency. And so I think what it's got to be, if Biden's going to have a stroke, something like that. If I had to write the script for them, I said, okay, here's how you guys get out of this mess. You have Biden have a stroke. He doesn't even have to fake it. He looks like he's already had one. Just stop giving him his meds. The stroke story will be perfect. For all we know, he's had one, Fetterman equivalent. And then you bring in Michelle. And Kamala's gone, wait, what about me? I go, no, you're too stupid. The same friend, by the way, has met Kamala and said that she is unimaginably stupid. Just unimaginably stupid. And so I don't think anyone wants Kamala. I think she's sort of as popular as Trump at this point, and within the party. And so Newsom doesn't seem like he's got a lot of explaining to do. It's his problem, right? If they start playing an infinite loop of Newsom's fiascos in California, he's going to get pounded. I mean, California's an embarrassment, right?
Well, he's running like he's a trophy. Like it's a trophy, and he's doing a great job.
I look at Newsom, and he looks like a 1980s porn star to me.
Yeah, I do think he has a future in politics, so I think we'll be talking about him for a little while longer, unless he has a scandal.
No, I agree. I'm not sure. I think Michelle can come in almost blemish-free, right?
I agree.
And the people voting for her will say, yeah, and she'll have Barack in her corner, so she's not even a novice. She knows where the spoons are, that sort of thing. I think Michelle would be perfect if they can find a way to bring her in.
I mean, she's even more perfect on paper than Hillary Clinton, and she's more likable.
Oh, way more perfect. Yeah, way better.
So
Hillary, I really detested Hillary. I think Hillary was a bad candidate because she was really unlikable. And Michelle has no skeletons except for that one hanging wherever it is. And I don't even know if that would upend her campaign.
That could be turned into a positive.
In this era, especially as the debate leaks out, I don't know what percentage of the population do you think knows the Big Mike rumor?
Very little.
What percent? Oh, interesting. You and I are Twitter hounds. We know it because it's all over there.
Right. So I mean, I hedge saying little because I don't assume, we're in a big group here on Twitter.
No.
And
no, but by the way, that as I wrote about Barack and his paddleboarding buddy who died, and I slipped in cryptic comments about Big Mike. Those cryptic comments will become infinite loops.
Well, I think even let's say 15% of the population.
Unless of course unless the guys who could play those loops refuse to play them.
I look at the breakdown like this, 15% of the population might know and entertain that kind of rumor or conspiracy theory.
But only a percentage of those care.
Then a 35% who've also heard of it don't care. And the other 50% have never heard of it and think you're crazy for entertaining it.
Right.
So you have 85% of the population that think it's wrong to even question it or bring it up, much less entertain it.
Well, I think it's just funny.
And I think it's, but I do think, where we are with sort of politics, it is important. But if you thought about politics from the
I don't know if it is
policy,
important.
It's not important from policy.
I don't know if it is important. I'm not sure it is important.
I think it's important from the way politics have been run and what it's become and what it actually is. It's a popularity contest, and we're trying to pick the most best person to represent us.
They hid the laptop that no one doubted was real, so I think they can probably blow by this one too.
Yeah, I mean they could hide DEWs if they're real. So maybe the final topic then, is the economy today.
Fascinating question.
Well,
it's stunning to me it hasn't imploded. When the four banks went south in the beginning of 2023, it looked like the cascade had begun, and then somehow they stopped it. And I didn't dig into how much money it cost to stop it, what they had to do to stop it. And I know that Jamie Dimon, of course, made a fortune for JP Morgan stopping it. But what I do know is that our debt is growing so fast, and that I think the commercial real estate market's starting to finally collapse. I think those stories are starting, and once they do, even though the banks didn't cascade, I think those will cascade. And I think we are now about to find out how many companies in the world were surviving on zero interest rate debt, which, because it's zero interest rate, you never have to pay it back. You just keep borrowing. So you get to run Ponzi finance the whole way. But once the debt got to 5%, sort of 6%, junk bonds probably, I don't know, what's a junk bond trading for now? It depends on the bond, of course, but that wouldn't shock me if it was 10%. These companies are not viable. And someone posted something today about a couple of companies going south. And we're going to start seeing small caps go to crap real fast. And we're going to start seeing office complexes. The jingle mail is not going to be McMansions. It's going to be gigantic office buildings. And as Bookfar said, I was on a panel discussion with him once, and he said they just have to hold rates at 5%, and it will eventually suffocate the system, because real estate runs on balloon loans. They don't buy 30-year mortgages. They always plan on refinancing a couple of years later. They're leveraging up the kazoo, And so when you're levered up the kazoo and all of a sudden rates go from 1 to 5, your debt payments just went up a factor of 5, and then you'll just quit. You'll just walk from it. You'll just write it down, and you'll have a bunch of different shell companies so that you don't destroy the rest of your empire. And who's going to buy those, right? So private equity guys bought up the McMansions, but I think that market's going to collapse again too. There's an awful lot of, there's gazillions of houses owned by massive pools of capital that are heavily leveraged, and when they have to refinance it, they will become unprofitable, because residential real estate's a shitty business to rent. What would you take a McMansion that you have a mortgage payment of that's a fuck ton. You can't rent it for that much. The guys who have that kind of money to rent buy. Right. And right now with mortgage rates so high, basically the cost of a residential house has to cut in half to start meeting the buyers. And it hasn't happened yet. And you say, okay, therefore it's not going to. No, it's just, there's a lag, right? There's a lag. And it always stuns me how long it takes the system to start to correct. I remember in March of 07, I thought the whole system was just going to blow. And it did, but it took 2 years. And it was stunning. I go, why? And the analogy I like is where if you put a big block of ice out on the sidewalk in the middle of the summer, it would turn to water, but not immediately. It takes time. So the thermodynamics is not the same as the kinetics. Your Bitcoin's done well for you, by the way.
That's done. It's doing what it's doing.
It's hard not to grin, right?
Well, you got to be realistic. Grinning now could lead to a 50% drop tomorrow.
I know.
Bitcoin would still be doing great and doing what it's doing.
I know.
And what it's supposed to.
Was it your podcast where, I think it was your podcast where I said that Bitcoin's going to destroy the people who don't know why they own it?
Yeah. And I believe in that. I think you encapsulated Bitcoin so well. I think you understand Bitcoin better than most, or better than you think. But I really take to heart what you're trying to do. And I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like, you're trying to survive the next 20 years.
Right.
And you have your bag. And you're like, I don't fully understand this thing. And I've heard you speak about this on my show. I think it's like, you're going to go up against the state. Right. And either the state's going to co-opt you, or there's going to be a bloody battle and maybe you win. And the day Dave buys Bitcoin is the day, maybe I skim a little off and buy my new house.
Or because it drops so much, I bought some. You don't, but I won't. I don't.
Well, I would buy on that day.
I'm not waiting for a dip. I
get it, and I think that's, you have a mission. But I am, kind of like, wow, like with Dave's intellectual curiosity, I'm surprised you're not, grabbing the bull by the horns and putting in the work. And I think in some ways,
I just don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth.
I don't know. I don't agree with it. I think it's a choice.
No, that's right. I'm choosing.
Yeah,
I'm choosing what to do.
Not to fight this battle.
But I don't have additional bandwidth, so sure. I would have to cut something out.
And, I do think it would solve some problems for you that you haven't thought about, maybe beyond, purchasing power, price appreciation, and markets, like even just, jurisdictional distribution and litigation. No one would be able to sue you for your wealth because your wealth would be,
Well, I've already thought about
untouchable.
that. I've already thought about that. It's hard to sue into a retirement account, and it's hard to sue. Supposedly they don't take your house, your retirement account, and they certainly don't take an asset that shall remain nameless that they don't know you own. And because you bought it,
sounds like you're describing Bitcoin too,
right? I'm just.
What I find interesting, I get it, and that's why I'm okay with it. Right. And Bitcoin's bigger than you and me, so it's irrelevant. What I find interesting on the other side of it though is that, like, you have I know you look at, the markets and economic
Mm-hmm.
signals and what's happening out there. And Bitcoin has got to be something that's off on the side, just screaming, like, look at
I
me.
watch it. I watch it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fascinating from a trend perspective. And I see it as Bitcoin is a true measure of the volatility in the world. So if Bitcoin crashes 50%, yeah, the world is a very volatile place. I have, the confidence that Bitcoin is a net positive volatile asset. And, the volatility is to the downside for the dollar and to the upside for Bitcoin long term. But, so it's just interesting. But so I'm happy for you that you're happy and you understand what's happening here. I think at some point it's gonna grab you a little harder than you realize, because it as just an economical thing, it's gonna keep yelling at you.
No, I
So
know.
it'll speak
I
for
know.
itself. The ETFs passed the other day. I mean, some people have said maybe that's the biggest event on Wall Street since maybe the S&P 500 became, an ETF with State Street. And these things take time. I mean, even the gold ETF went
I
down
would
for the
say that's
first
more
year.
like I would say that's more
Uh,
like GLD.
well, even GLD, I mean, that when that happened, though,
I think GLD hurt gold.
for the first year, but
No,
gold
no,
did go
no,
up
no, no, no. I
after
think
that,
GLD flat out hurt gold though.
maybe flat out harder. And
I think
I
I
can see
think
that
I think
argument.
GLD has gotten in the way of gold.
And I come at it with Bitcoin, I think, as a tool to get away from Wall Street. So, I'm not, that's why I kind of stayed quiet a little bit on this whole thing, because it's just another machination in this process. But I do think, all the things we're talking about, I mean, I wonder if we're already in World War III already.
Sort
And,
of. Yeah.
if we're in a civil war.
Sort of.
And
I view World War III as a global civil war.
mm,
Look at all the Palestinian protests all over the world.
right.
Every city.
Do you think October 7th is a cataclysmic event like 9/11 in the way they've kind of drawn at it that way?
Well, I think I don't talk much about Israel Palestine. What I don't do is talk about who's right and who's wrong.
Yep.
I avoid that. I will talk about why I think it's a potentially exceedingly dangerous geopolitical situation. I will go so far as saying right now the optics for Israel don't look very good. Right? I have no trouble saying that. I think there are times where the good guys can have bad optics. So I won't even let that be interpreted as a pro-Israel, anti-Israel, either way. I'm so ignorant of the situation, which didn't stop me from writing about Ukraine, but I think Israel-Palestine is way more complicated than Ukraine-Russia. Because I actually think Ukraine-Russia was real simple.
Right.
And what I will say, the one thing I say about it is it seems pretty clear to me that Israel let Hamas do it. That's the one thing I'll say.
That struck with me, and that's what
Yeah,
struck
they
with me
had to
about
have.
borders.
They had to have, because if I had said to you before they attacked, if I said, look, they're going to drop 800 Hamas into Israel, how long would it take the Israelis to mop them up? You would have said, I don't know, 2 minutes,
14
3
seconds,
minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been an unbelievable. The grandmothers of Israel could have taken them out, right? This just wouldn't have. This just and for them to run around
the story.
Yeah, for them to run around unmolested for 8 hours. And one time I read, it said the reason you build walls is not to keep people out, it's to keep them in. So if you break through a wall, when it comes time to get out, all they have to do is defend the hole. You're not getting out. And so that stuck with me, and I'm going, okay, so these guys get in, run around for 8 hours, and somehow they got captives out. Right. So now that makes sense. So the moral of the story is I think it was Israel's 9/11 in more ways than one. And friends would say, okay, well, why did Israel do it? And I said, well, watch what they do over the next couple of years, and that'll be your answer. So whatever they did, you watch what we did after 9/11. What did we do? We moved the troops into the Middle East. That's why we let 9/11 happen. We let Pearl Harbor happen. What did we do? We joined World War II. We let the Lusitania get sunk. Why did we do it? We moved into World War I, right? It's a standard protocol. Israel has a plan, and whether it's to completely flatten the Gaza Strip, I don't know. And I do believe it does look to me like Israel could play this wrong.
Mm.
It could be they are playing it wrong. I don't know. I feel so ignorant about it. But I got to figure there's some people in the Middle East who are even less happy with Israel than they were 6 months ago. And that doesn't seem like a win to me. So I'm mystified by it. But morally, I can't get into it. I don't know. I think the optics for Israel looks morally problematic. I agree with that. But again, the optics for Putin look problematic, and I just dug deep enough to find out that we're just being lied to. So I'm really worried about optics. The one thing that the West and the world is very good at now is controlling optics. So, for example, how many people died in Israel? How many Israelis died from the attack? I have no idea. We've been told stories. So the only comments I've really made, day one, maybe the next day, I said, if you think I'm going to be commenting about Israel and Palestine, you're dreaming. I said, what I will say is that the propaganda will be so thick that you should put your default setting on doubt. So from that point on, it was clear that there was going to be all sorts of bullshit lying. And I don't know how many people got captive, got killed, got raped, got murdered, got decapitated in Israel. I don't know. And I don't think many people do. Just like I don't know how many people died in Lahaina. And so I'm just watching from the cheap seats on this one. And people could get mad at me and say, well, you're supporting a Holocaust. Both sides will say that. They'll both say that. They say, you don't support Palestine, you're a bad guy. You don't support Israel, you're a bad guy. I'm letting them shout amongst themselves. I have nothing to bring to the story besides the fact that I'm watching with great interest because it could turn into a disaster for the rest of the world. If it stays contained to Israel and Palestine, then my agnosticism, verbal agnosticism, will remain. But if we end up bombing the shit out of Iran and they end up bombing the shit out of us using sleeper cells coming over the border, the rules changed in a very bad way. And so I think that's the great risk. Israel will eventually do something, will eventually finish whatever it is they're doing. I don't know what it is. And if it happens and then it calms down, then we dodged a bullet. Not to say, you want to get upset. We killed 4.5 million Middle Easterners. The US did in the last 20 years. How is that not a Holocaust? We bombed more countries than Russia ever did. How is that not a Holocaust? So the sanctimony industrial complex gets pretty fired up on stuff, and they tend to, where were they when the Saudis were bombing the Yemenis? They're still bombing the Yemenis now. Khashoggi gets killed, right? Everyone has a shit fit over Khashoggi. Khashoggi was in on an attempted assassination of Mohammed bin Salman. That's why he took out Khashoggi. So if he was CIA. So Khashoggi got skinned and filleted and fed to the camels by MBS to show the other guys who might be interested in turning against MBS, don't mess with me. Supposedly locked him in a room and showed him the videotape of Khashoggi getting dealt with. Say, this will be you next if you fuck with me. Now, I don't even know if this is true.
Right.
I just
Reminds
know
me
that
of
it's in.
what Saddam Hussein did, though, with
Yes. When he called everyone in the room and
Yeah.
started pulling people out one at a time.
Yeah.
Holy shit. And they were shitting pickles.
Now,
The
I mean, who knows if
sweat-
that was true, but I believe the story, and I've seen some
It
video.
looked
And
pretty authentic.
even
It
if it's
looked
not a
pretty
real
authentic.
story, I do believe that some leaders have done that kind of thing.
Well,
And
that's a classic decimation, right?
Yeah.
That's the definition of decimation. He took out 10% of the guys and killed them. That's what the Roman army used to do. That's what the Romans used to do.
And they don't even have to be guilty of anything, though. You'd still get the same
No.
message across.
Yeah, you can't kill your whole army. You kill 10% and make the other 90 fight harder.
Right.
So humans have done bad stuff for so long that to think that something bad can't happen is ridiculous. That's the ridiculous assumption. And I worry about it in the United States. Weaponization of the DOJ to me is a horrific turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at the Israel thing, I drew a few conclusions right away. I mean, if they let him in, you have an internal problem. You need to change your leadership. If they didn't let him in, you have an internal problem. You need to fix your
defense. Change your
defense.
military. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to fix the fence.
You got a leadership problem, you know. And that just made me look at our border, and it made me feel like how do we not have a strong border? Because a lot of people on both sides said, well, you know, if you have the strong border, you don't have this incident in Israel.
But we made it crystal clear that we will take any number that comes flooding over the border. That was made so obvious.
So then maybe a strong border doesn't mean no one comes over the border, you know, and I wonder how much they're, you know, it's like getting me to feel 100% either way is not necessarily a good thing.
Well, you know, we had a sort of a balanced equilibrium. The border was being crossed by Mexicans, right? That's the border. I read a book by
There's more Americans illegally in Mexico than there are Mexicans, I think, illegally in the United States.
Right?
Yeah, because people go, they vacation, they retire, they stay past their visa, they buy property, whatever it might be. There's a lot of illegal Americans in Mexico.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's more though. I'd be hard pressed.
Maybe I'd have to validate that fact.
Yeah, there are illegal Americans. Is the point. But there was this kind of tacit agreement, right? So you come over here, don't cause trouble, pay your taxes, send money back to your family,
right?
Mow our lawns, clean our houses, pick our grapes, and we will just pretend like you're not here. And then somehow Biden got in there, and it turned into it got very sort of Jimmy Carter-like when he told the Cubans to send us your mass as they empty their prisons.
I mean, I have a feeling, I mean, are some countries emptying their prisons literally and saying, hey, it's a lot cheaper to put them on a flight or a bus halfway, the whole way, and not for us to bathe, feed, and house these people that are not, producing.
That's what Cuba did, and it's not like that, therefore wasn't part of the playbook. And so these guys, they didn't march 2,000 miles to get here. You know, that story just doesn't hold any water. They're coming over, they're walking in sandals, you know, they're getting dropped off. And then the question is by whom, why, that sort of thing. What I do know is if all of a sudden 100 North Africans show up in Ithaca, the town of Ithaca is going to be a different place. Because you won't be able to go downtown without walking through a crowd that's pretty dangerous. And so you won't go to downtown Ithaca.
Right.
And therefore, the town will change.
I'm seeing it in New York and Chicago. I mean, Chicago believes, housing is a human right. The city should run grocery stores. I mean, it goes way further.
Oh, God, the grocery store.
So I want to humble brag a little bit. My great uncle played pro football with Jim Brown, because you mentioned lacrosse before.
Right.
But I want to ask you about another pro baseball player. What do you think would happen with Trevor Bauer?
Oh, is he the guy who got accused of sexual assault?
Yeah.
And then they were able to, through some sort of deposition or something, find out that the chick set him up.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens with him. The question is what happens to her. So I think I personally.
Well, his life, I mean, has been ruined though. Like
totally,
he was a all-star pitcher.
But who's he going to sue?
He could sue everybody. I don't know why he can't.
Well,
I don't think he needs to. I think he won as much as he's ever going to win in the court of public opinion and what he felt he needed to do.
But it's like the three guys who got acquitted for trying to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. They got acquitted on all counts because it was a total bogus thing in which the other 9 were feds. But at the same time, they're never going to be the same. So in 2020, I got canceled. It's not in the same zip code as what these guys have gone through. Getting canceled versus getting thrown in jail for something you didn't do. Very different thing. But it changed me. It definitely changed me. And so I guarantee you that some guy who's been through a really, life-wrenching event like that, he's not going to be the same again. He's going to carry that one. And you can't sue her. The question is what should happen. So I think the false accusation of rape, in which not just that you didn't prove he raped you, but rather it is proven beyond reasonable doubt in a court of law that you falsely accused him, right? So accusing someone of rape and having it not hold, that's not a false accusation. That means it didn't hold. But if you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the woman falsely accused the guy of rape, that to me is a worse crime than rape. The reason it's a worse crime than rape is because the rape victim has the rest of her life to try to repair herself. The guy who gets falsely convicted of rape has no mechanism to repair himself. Once you've been convicted of rape, you're done. You are done. And so to me, it should be at least a multi-year prison sentence. And I know the left-wing activists will say, oh, no, then people won't come forward. I go, no, I said in a court of law beyond reasonable doubt, proven she falsely accused him of rape. That should not in any way restrain a woman from accusing some guy who raped her. Because there's no way to prove she lied. If you can prove someone lied, you hang them. You treat them just like you treat the vile rapist. It's just a rape of a different kind.
It's interesting, the lying in society.
Well, that's sociopathy. That's sociopathy. The book, The Sociopath Next Door, is kind of a helpful primer on sociopathy.
It makes me think, there was the Halloween where Elon dressed up as the devil or some sort of, I don't know if you saw that. I mean, I just, these are difficult conversations, not
Very
uplifting,
difficult.
No. And I'm just wondering where do you see a light anywhere?
Not right now.
Not at all? Maybe because it's winter?
I see some light. I see some light. I think certain stories are going to go away. I think actually that the aggressive transgender changes are going to go away. I think hospitals are having trouble getting insurance, things like that. I think there's problems. I think the transgender in sports is going to go away. I did a Twitter poll, got 5,000 votes, said, no waffling, no ifs, ands, or buts. Should biological males be able to compete in women's sports, period? Yes or no? No alternative answer. 97.5% said no. What it means is that no one on the fucking planet thinks this is a good idea. It's a terrible idea. At some point, that will be the emperor has no clothes. And Riley Gaines has made great progress. And people are waking up. And I think at some point it'll become okay to say, look, dudes should not be doing women's sports. I think there's a lot of things that boys and girls do that should be just kept separate. Guys need to be able to take their sons out camping with just their sons. That's what it takes to raise a son. And I don't think you get to necessarily push the girls into that group, because fathers need to just hang out with their sons. And that's how you civilize them. And so, as I think Ann Coulter said, is there no activity that the activists can't keep their grubby little paws off? And I that's a good rhetorical question. And so I think there's progress there. I think the absurdity of the left's views is starting to resonate with a lot of people. So there's that. But the battle for the internet looks to me like it's going to keep going. I don't see politics cleaning up. Maybe we'll have an election where something will be, maybe there'll be a red wave that'll convince me that people have had enough of the Democrats for a while. Because they'll change if it's not working. They're not taking their stances out of principle. just like the Republicans are not. So they will find the happy medium where it's a 50-50 balancing act. And right now it's not there, in my opinion. And there might be people who will still vote for Biden because it's Trump, but at some point they're going to get fucking mad that they've been handed a demented, pervy sack of shit, lying, pathological, sociopathic, selling us down the river president, who's worse than any president in history, in my opinion. And that includes Woodrow Wilson, who I'm not a big fan of.
I'm going to read you. You quoted, I think, Constantine's
Kyson.
speech. Yeah. I'm going to read that, and I'll have one more question for you.
Okay.
I want to talk to those of you who are woke and who are open to rational argument. A small minority I accept, because one of the tenets of wokeness, of course, is that your feelings matter more than the truth. But I believe in you. I believe there are those of you here who are woke, who are open to rational arguments. So let me make one. We are told that your generation cares more than any other about one issue in particular, and that issue is climate change. We're told that many of you suffer from climate anxiety. You wish to save the planet, and for tonight and tonight only, I will join you. I will join you in worshiping at the feet of St. Greta of climate change. Let us all accept right here, right now, that we are living through a climate emergency, and our stocks of polar bears are running extremely low. I join you in this view. I truly do. Now, what are we to do about this huge problem facing humanity? What can we in Britain do? We can only do one thing. You know why? This country is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, which means that if Britain was to sink into the sea right now, it would make absolutely no difference to the issue of climate change. You know why? Because the future of the climate is going to be decided in Asia and in Latin America by poor people who couldn't give a shit about saving the planet. It's going to be decided by poor people in Asia and Latin America who don't care about saving the planet. No, thank you. No, thank you. You know why? Because they're poor. Because they're poor. I come from Russia, which is not a poor country. It's a middle income country. 20% of households in Russia do not have an indoor toilet. What they have is an outdoor toilet. And I don't mean one of those nice portaloos that we get here. I don't even mean a Glastonbury portaloo. I mean a wooden shack with a hole in the ground. The hole is a collected, fermented memory of the last 10,000 visits. How many of you are going to go home tonight and say, let's rip out our bathroom and erect a Siberian shithouse in the back garden? And if you're not, why should they? 120 million people in China who do not have enough food. I mean, they suffer from malnutrition. That means that their immune system is breaking down because they don't have enough food. You're not going to get them to stay poor. Imagine Xi Jinping, the leader of China. When you were 10 years old, there was a revolution, a cultural revolution in your country, and people came and they threw your father in prison. Your mother had to denounce him. Your sister killed herself, and you, no longer enjoying the protection of your formerly powerful father, was sent to a village where you had lived in a cave house. And here you are decades later. You have clawed your way up the bloody and greasy pole of Chinese politics to be the undisputed supreme leader of the very Communist Party that destroyed your family. And you know that the main thing that you have to do to survive and to stay in power is to deliver the one thing that the people of China want: prosperity, economic growth. Where do you think climate change ranks on Xi's list of priorities? A third of all children who live in extreme poverty in the world live in India. That means they are starving and dying of preventable diseases now. Now, about 15 months ago, my wife got pregnant. Not me, because we're old school. And for 9 months, we talked about what our boy would look like, what he might do when he grows up. We looked at baby scans and videos on YouTube about what the fetus looks like at 9 weeks and 12 weeks and 20 weeks, and eventually he was born. And he is this cute little bundle of joy. He's cuter than about 80% of puppies, right? Now, if you said to me that I had a choice, either my son had a serious risk of starving or dying from a preventable disease in the next year, or I could press a button and he would live, he would go to school, he would bring his first girlfriend home, he'd go to university and graduate and become a woke idiot. And then he'd get a job and get married and have children and become a man. But all I have to do is press this button, and for every day of my son's life, a giant plume of CO2 is going to get released into the atmosphere. Now, you're all very young, and most of you are not parents. Let me tell you something. There is not a parent in the world who would not smash that button so hard their hand bled. You're not going to get these people to stay poor. You're not even going to get them to not want to be richer. And so I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one thing we can do in this country to stop climate change, and that is to make scientific and technological breakthroughs that will create the clean energy that is not only clean, but also cheap. And the only thing that wokeness has to offer in exchange is to brainwash bright young minds like yours to believe that you are victims, to believe that you have no agency, to believe that what you must do to improve the world is to complain, is to protest, is to throw soup on paintings. And we on this side of the house are not on this side of the house because we do not wish to improve the world. We sit on this side of the house because we know that the way to improve the world is to work, is to create, is to build. And the problem with woke culture is that it has trained too many young minds like yours to forget about that. Thank you very much, Constantine. So my final question to you is, do you see any hope going forward? Maybe we're going through a fourth turning. Maybe we're going to enter a renaissance. I think Bitcoin's going to play a big part into this. After this conversation, it's hard to be optimistic, but if I had to smash a button, I'm going to go with optimism. As much as I always want to be a bear, it pays way more to be a bull. And I got my kids and my grandkids to think about. So do you see any hope going forward? That we're going to ride through this storm and somehow we're going to correct things, not move to globalism or whatever the ills of the world might be?
Well, yes. The challenge we have is that, for example, the Great Depression was just the blink of an eye. So from 1929, period of great prosperity, and I've had arguments with economists that the Great Depression ended in 1945, not 1939. And I think I make a compelling case that they're full of shit. But let's call it 10 years. It was 10 really shitty years. And Soviet Union lasted only 70 years. That's not a long empire. That's a relatively short empire. That's one lifetime empire. But it was horrific while we went through it. So the trick is to get through the valley of death, metaphorically valley of death, and come out the other side sort of intact. And the Bitcoiners and the gold hodlers and the goldlers and the hodlers, as I like to say, have about a 98% Venn diagram overlap. It's only a question of how do we get there.
Yeah.
And I've been on a pitch to sell Michael Malice's book. Malice owes me. I've probably made him about $10,000 this week alone. I'm doing podcasts every day. And his book, The White Pill, is a history of the Soviet Union. And what's brilliant about the book is that he somehow manages to not fall into the trap of turning it into a bunch of Russian names that no one can pronounce. I tried to read Gordon Chang's book about China, and I lost interest. It was just a bunch of Chinese crap. So Malice talks about the rise of the Soviet Union from Lenin through Stalin. Amazing heroes show up, like Khrushchev was a hero. And never had I heard that. But when Khrushchev took power, he fessed up to everything that Stalin had done and basically said, we should never do this again. Now, were they great after that? No, but that was a huge step. And then Gorbachev, he really comes off a shining light. Gorbachev really nails it. What's his face? The drunk. What's his name? Come on.
Boris Yeltsin.
Yeltsin. Yeah, Yeltsin just comes off as a footnote. But what we all know is that 40 million people died. What we don't know is how they died, and what the book describes is how society ate itself. Now, again, with the leadership of some very bad people, some sick, twisted, not just sociopaths, but demented, really twisted bastards. But as you're reading, you can't help but say, don't let that happen here. Do not let this happen here. And that's why it hit me so hard, because I've been watching what I think is an attempt to get us to consume ourselves. And then Malice lays out the Soviet Union consumed itself. And the 40 million dead people weren't just 40 million people getting shot. That's a simple story. It's 40 million people who learned to cooperate with a system that killed 40 million. And so the other book I sell hard is Eric Hoffer's The True Believer. Those two, to me, are phenomenal must reads. And I get recommended books all the time, so I understand the too many books, not enough time stuff. But those are phenomenal books. And I keep pumping Malice's book on Twitter, and he keeps thanking me. That's good. He sees it. And I keep saying, when I was reading it, I'm going, don't let that happen here. And it feels like it's happening here when you weaponize the DOJ. You know, there's memes out there now where they show all these tyrants, and then the last one is Biden, and it says these are the various leaders who arrested their political opponent. The idea, if Trump did something truly horrible, then he in theory has to pay. But I'm pretty sure that no matter which party it is, my bar would be very, very high before I signed off. Like, I didn't like Clinton's impeachment because it was on a procedural issue. So they didn't impeach him for doing anything really bad. They impeached him for lying. Well, they put him in a situation where lying seemed like the best approach. And so they trapped him. And so that wasn't right. So I don't think they should be arresting Trump and prosecuting Trump unless they have some truly bad stuff. And it seems crystal clear to me they got nothing. So that's a Lenin Stalin show trial. And now I'm watching Trump, and he seems unfazed by it. Now that could be the Donald, but it could also be that he knows something we don't know, and that is he knows this is all for show. He might know they're not going to take him to prison, and that he just has to win the optics battle. Or he could be just, balls that big, willing to just go at him that much. And there's a Trump documentary called The Trump Dynasty, and my wife was watching. She was getting mad at it because of Trump being the garish fuck that he was. It was about his real estate development, his childhood, and stuff like that. I was watching, and I was reading it totally different. So he, for example, built a building without getting any of the signatures. None of them. He just signed it. And then he built the building. And my wife's going, oh, that's just so bad. And I go, that's chutzpah. And then at one point he's building one of his towers, and the concrete workers are on strike, but he's getting concrete delivered. And she's going, oh, that means he's tied with the mob. And I said, no, that means that he knows how to get the job done. Somehow he found a way to get that job done. And so I'm sure that it involves some shitty stuff, but that's New York development too. And so it's possible Trump knows he's never going to go to prison, period. It might be that this is all got the same toothlessness as the January 6th congressional committee, that I would line them up against the wall and punish them. How's that? Punish them? Liz Cheney, if she gets some debilitating cancer, I'd cheer. I want nothing. I don't want her. Clean out the gene pool. I think they're pushing the average Joe to the point where it either changes or something bad happens. Because I'm 68 years old. I'm not going to do any of the shit I think I would like to be able to do. But there is going to be some guy whose kid gets taken away from him because he won't support a gender transition. And he's going to go kill the doctor. And that's going to be the fault of the doctor. That's going to be that's on the doctor. There was Gladwell had a book about that. They talked about culture of honor. It turns out it's regional, but all down the Appalachians, Hatfields and McCoys, those guys, that was culture of honor. You diss me, I'll diss you, right? And they were just a famous example of it. And they've studied it. And one day there was a guy who was getting ragged at a gas station pretty badly by two guys at the gas station. They were wailing on him pretty good, just giving him shit. And he pulls out a gun and kills him. And he gets acquitted. And they asked the juror, how did you acquit him? And the juror, this is in some southern rural place, and the juror said, They should have known better. That's culture of honor. They should have known better, right? When I got canceled in 2020 is when the guy got knocked over in Buffalo. And I said, I don't know why I was poking the cops. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you poke a riot police? It turns out he was skimming their equipment. But I got so much shit for that. But he should have known better. And there's got to be people out there at some point. At some point, if I'm some doctor who's doing gender changes, I'm prosecuting people unfairly. If I was a family member of a J6er sitting in a 20-year jail term, I don't know what I'd do, but I know what I'd be thinking. I'd be thinking about retribution. How could you not be thinking about retribution? Now, the reason they're not getting retribution right now is because what they're hoping is that Trump gets elected and they all get pardoned. It would be really stupid to go on a rampage before that, but I would respect the person who gets even. I think, they hung horse thieves. They couldn't fuck around. You steal a man's horse. We got to deal with it. I think when we go lawless, which we're going very lawless. I think you get exactly what you would predict when you go lawless. You end up in some place like Somalia. I'm watching a TV show with my wife. It's about St. James. It's up on the Hudson River. It's 1730. And there's guys who are like super douchebags, super evil douchebags. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, in those days, how did you get away with being that much of a douchebag? Because it would be so easy for someone to say, look, I've had enough of this guy. How hard would it be to take him out, right? I get this feeling that was common. And therefore you learn not to be necessarily such a super douchebag because there were no guardrails. And I think the guys who survived are the ones who knew how to not end up on shit lists. And there's a lot of people in the political system right now who are on shit lists. And if the guillotines ever come out, boy, I'd not be underwriting their life insurance policies. So, these things that I'm saying could get me in so much trouble. But I'm 68 years old, so I don't care. My wife would care. But
My wife cares.
Well, you still have a lot left. I could retire today if I wanted. And so, but does this make sense to you?
It does. Too much sense. That's the problem. Everywhere else, nothing's making sense, and that's frustrating.
I've always wondered why divorce lawyers don't get capped all the time. I've always wondered that because you got to figure it gets real ugly in there, right? And if I'm some dude and some divorce lawyer is just taking it to me, you could just imagine the person just losing it. Why would you ever go into a grocery store and shoot everyone when you could take out your wife's divorce lawyer? I've never understood. Pick a target at least, right? Holy shit. The guys who went postal, remember going postal was the term. They went into where they worked. And it was it turns out working at the post office was stressful. I had a girlfriend who worked there. Now, you were under the gun. But at least there was this sort of logic where the guy was associating his excruciating mental pain, which might be imbalances, who knows what, with what appeared to be the source of his excruciating pain. Now, the victims obviously weren't deserving. But nowadays, we got a bunch of people who seem to think there'll be no consequences to them being complete and utter douchebags. And I don't think humans put up with it forever before they finally snap. And would it be a good thing? I don't know, but if I was one of these bad dudes and all of a sudden the bad dudes started getting capped for being bad dudes, I go, I I think I'll stop doing that. That's getting kind of sketchy looking. Not a bad message to send. Now, January 6th, obviously, they were sending a message too. I snapped the other day when I watched Biden brag about putting people in jail for 870 years for January 6th. Now, I don't even know if that includes the pre-trial jail time. I lose my shit when I read about people still in jail from January 6th who haven't yet come to trial. I go, that's just a gulag. I lose my shit when I read about the possibility, I'll call it possibility because I have no idea how to check it, that the jails are actually being staffed by foreign nationals. Because you can't get, you can imagine a guard in a prison being MAGA. So what do? You bring in guys who couldn't give less of a fuck. You bring in, by the way, January 6th, there were Ukrainians there. There were Ukrainians at January 6th. Why bring in Ukrainians? Well, first of all, you get them to do anything you want because they'll kill anybody. And then you cap them because they're expendable. They're not going to talk at you. So you bring in a Ukrainian. Right? And they think they're part of the plot. And they go, yeah, but you're about to get written out of the plot too. So January 6th to me was a profound period in American history, but it was the post-January 6th response that was profound. January 6th, the day, was a bad day, but by no means the worst. We did shit in the 1920s when we killed World War I veterans who wanted their pensions. We killed like 120 of them. What to me is disgusting is when Merrick Garland stands up in front of Congress and says the rioters in January 6th, and some of them should get prison terms, no question, especially the ones who work for the feds. But the rioters on January 6th killed 5 cops. The Attorney General of the United States just lied his ass off. Completely fabricated piece of shit. He's treasonous. I don't. Let's invent the word treason. Let's reinvent it and then hang the fucker for it, right? Because they didn't kill 5 cops. Here's the really fucked up story. 1 cop died later. We don't know why, but he was fine until he died. That's a pretty weird story in its own right. The other 4 out of what? How many cops do you think were at January 6th? What do you, wild guess, winner take all. What do you think, 150? Maybe?
More, I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't think, but I didn't see that many cops.
I didn't see any much, but
4 committed suicide. Are you telling me that day caused 4 cops to commit suicide? No. Someone capped them. Why? When you answer that question, Nancy Pelosi will be somewhere in view. 4 cops committed suicide. 4, that's got to be like 4 out of 100, 4 out of 150, something like that. Cops have tough days every day. They don't just go home and commit suicide. Oh, it's really stressful. Yeah, being a cop is stressful. So there's a story there. I don't think Ashley Babbitt got shot. I wrote about it. I showed it to people. It turns out you needed the videotapes to see it. The thing looked like a setup to me. Some guy did a great job of showing it. And then I read all the comments. I found more stuff I couldn't write about because you need video to show it. And I sent it to some very smart people and they said, I see what your point is. I'm not sure, blah, 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 blah. About 3 weeks ago, Cheryl Atkinson went through the case. She missed a bunch of shit, but she went through the case that there was something wrong at the Babbitt shooting. But I don't think she got shot. I think someone probably jammed a syringe needle in her ass on the way out. But there's weird stuff going on there. The guys who broke the window that she crawled through, they were feds. They were feds. The guy, and what Cheryl did is she took 2 federal agents and showed them the footage and said, and they'd go, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. Like this one guy smashes the window and then he goes down the stairs, changes his shirt, takes something out of his backpack behind the cops. They're going, they'd never let him get behind them. And then when you look at it, when she was down and they were doing their whole thing, no one was providing health care. They were all screaming and yelling and moving the body and jiggling her and pulling on her shirt and doing this. No health care. No one was saying, find the wound, put the pressure. There's no blood squirting out. Some guy's working on a guy's head. The guy who analyzed the case, the guy who did a good job. It's on Rumble. He tried to get a piece of gauze out of some mess kit, some first aid kit. And he finally gets the gauze out. And I'm not shitting you. He wipes her jacket with it. And then when she's up, there's a puddle of blood that looks like a shot glass. And then they're doing CPR. And I talked to surgeons. I go, would you ever do CPR on someone who took a shot in the neck? No, because you go boop-ba, 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 right? And they drag her down. They don't take her out on a gurney. At the end, they did. They take her down the stairs by her arms and legs. 2 guys. And she's still got her fucking backpack on. You know, what kind of clown show is this? I think they wrote her out of the plot. I think she was part of the plot, and I think they goddamn then they faked the shooting. Then they jammed a syringe needle in her, killed her. I'm making that part up. I don't know how to do it, but there was no splatter on the walls. Just nothing was right about it. But I could not write about it because it needed video. And some, they've tried to they've just tried to delete them, but they're all over the place. But if you watch this, and then Cheryl got on it. She got on it, and she recognized the problems. And it turns out, those stupid QAnon and those other stupid guys that look like the Taliban. One of them's the son of a Democratic judge. He's not MAGA. The whole fucking thing is a farce. But there's guys rotting in jail for 870 years because Biden and his team of Stalinist, neo-fascist pigs are trying to make a point. Did they shoot anyone when they broke into Kavanaugh hearings? No. Interrupting a function of a federal procedure? No. The goddamn insurrectionists show up and they forgot to bring guns? Oh, so we're going to take over the government with no guns, and then we're going to go home that night and we're going to go to Ponderosa, get in our Winnebago and go home? That gets you 807. And now they announced last week they're not done. Now they're going to go after the people who didn't go in the building. They're going after the people who didn't go in the building. This is treason. This is going to get the MAGA crowd locking and loading. And the left, if they eat it, they're going to deserve it. But the Republicans are doing nothing too. So this is a lot of meat cake moment. This is you can tell it gets me going. It just gets me so furious. And I talk to cops. I say, well, you do the crime, you do the crime, you do the time. I go, okay, you're driving down the fucking street next week and you get caught doing 40 and a 30. I have to take your fucking license for 10 years. You did the crime, you pig fucker. You get the time. And that's not how the system works. You can rape a girl and get less time than Denny Terrio. I don't know what Denny Terrio did. He planned the protest. I don't know how much further it went. And all the tapes that were not released that could have been used to defend themselves. But they didn't get released. And by the way, the Republicans didn't release them either. Tucker Carlson had them. He didn't release them. The new Speaker of the House has them, hasn't released them. So they can eat shit and die too. I don't care. I did it. Now I'm gone. Now my pulse is up. Now I'm just livid.
Dave, this has been amazing as always. I don't know if you caught the last Dave Chappelle special.
I don't know if I did either. What do you talk about?
I think you'll really
genius.
appreciate it. I think the first joke you'll love, and I think the last joke.
What's the topic? What's the topic? So I know when I find it.
The topic is
can you send me? Can you
he's
send
not
me
punching down anymore. The topic is he's not punching down anymore, and he explains that. It's called The Dreamer. It's on Netflix.
The dreamer. Okay.
But he gets into the woke stuff, he gets into transgender stuff, he moves through it. But last joke gets has the satanic hint to it. And I think he knows way more than he's let on if you go back to maybe some of his earlier interviews.
Well, I think Mel Gibson knew more than people realize.
Yeah, I think so too.
Mel Gibson got slaughtered, and I think Mel was trying to tell us that they're doing perverted shit. Bald Britney was because they were raping her, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you heard about the MK Ultra thing where like anyone who's dyed their hair blonde, not anyone, but that's a sign or a signal.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And so you'll see, Kanye's dyed his hair blonde at times. Britney did. You'll see kind of that. And I do think there's a lot there to that. You made me also think of the book It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis, just in terms of what, we don't want to happen here and what could happen here. So this has been so dope as always. I wonder, when are you going to be on the Joe Rogan show? And I'll leave it to
that's
you
up to Joe. Supposedly my resume is on his talent scout's desk. I was told that, but I'm waiting. If I get on Rogan, I'll finally get fired. That'll be the end of it right there.
Right.
But,
And I think that'd be the end of his show, because I don't think he wants to jump the shark.
I don't know. He's gone to some pretty dark places. Once in a while, he says something I totally disagree with. I'd love for that to come up, because I'd love to say, no, Joe, I think you're missing this one. I've had some exchanges with him. I asked him about climate change, and he said, have you ever talked about it because that's a real cesspool or something? And I said, I'm pretty familiar with it. I think he should have me instead of yet another, fighter or comedian.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how much he's a limited hangout. Who knows? I don't
know.
I do think that, if you wanted to control alternative media, a great way would be to see Tucker on X and Rogan on Spotify, and those could be your new ABC.
So if you should have Dave Smith on, if you could get him to come on.
Yeah,
he'd be phenomenal.
Comic. Yep.
Yeah, he's a genius too.
He's hard for me to get in touch with.
I know the guy. I know. I just did a podcast with his warm-up comedian, and I said, please tell Dave next time you see him that I adore what he says. So we're connected on Twitter, but he doesn't answer. His DMs are dead. I'm sure. Well, the DM is why Twitter's so important, right? There's people I can get to now that were unimaginable before.
Same. I'm talking to one of them.
Yeah. Anyone can get to me. I'm known. I have a publicly available email address too. Bobby Kennedy's email, but I have a funny feeling that his email box is probably a bit of a dumpster fire. I'm sure. Dave, this has been so great. Thank you so much. Let people know where they can find you and your work. My Twitter feed is David B. Collum. My year in review is my pinned tweet. And I'm a chemist at Cornell. And if you know my name and I'm a chemist at Cornell and you're not smart enough to find my email, I don't want to talk to you. But otherwise, I do try to answer emails. I got to put out part 3? I don't know. I'm part 3 could get me in trouble. Part 3 is the pedophile story. I'm going to write it with no brakes on, and then I'm going to think about it. One of the concerns about part 3 is that there are people who are saying everything I've said, but I worry that they're in the club and I'm not, and that they say, okay, we'll let Liz Crocken wail away because she's actually on our team, even though she says this shit. But we got to stop this guy at Cornell from saying this shit. So I don't know if I'm not sure I'm reading the room correctly, but there's some very, very famous pedophiles out there, and writing about them without saying who they are is kind of amorphous, and you'll get the names of them after they die. That's one thing I notice. By the way, if you read the Epstein, the trial, the release of the trial transcripts from last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever, the last couple of weeks, what you can hear is that Joffrey or whatever her name is, and the various people who are accusing Epstein of doing things to them, they never name anybody. They always say, I can't remember his name. So they don't want to get capped. And so, Kevin Spacey had 4 lawsuits against him, and 3 of them died. Right?
Yeah.
You just got to be careful. And I don't know if I'm irrelevant enough they wouldn't care, or relevant enough they'd say, look, we got to make a case. We got to deal with them, because we can't have other people shooting their mouths off. But I talk about them. That's the irony. So I talk about them.
Can't wait.
And they're horrible names. They're people you go, oh, please, we know Bill Cosby's fucked up. Every bit as bad as Bill Cosby. Every bit as bad as Bill Cosby.
Well, we're waiting. I love what you're putting out, and always love chatting with you. Thank you so much, Dave.
Adios, sir.
Hey, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast with Professor David B. Collum. I hope that you enjoyed it and found it as informative and engaging as I did. Hit us up. We'd love to hear your feedback. I want to thank you for tuning in. Please keep in mind that I only work with the best sponsors and that they are a big reason I could deliver this content to you for free. So I hope that you will check them out and support them. Finally, if you could write a 5-star review for the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, that would really help get the word out and help new listeners to find the show. As always, keep building, keep stacking, and stay laser focused out there.